a young man kept having the same strange dream. He found himself lost in a land that didn't exist in his world, a place called Japan. In his dream, he not only went there, but also lived there. Everything felt eerily real, as if he were reliving someone else's memories. In that strange world, he learned countless things he had never known before, thanks to books, television, the internet, and video games. But there was one particular game that appealed to him more than any other. Interchange Noah, or Res Noah for short. This is a role-playing game where the player takes on the role of Alex, the commander of the resistance forces, fight against the villain who uses an army of demons to rule the world. The plot seems simple, but the difficulty is incredibly high. That's precisely what makes it so appealing. He took a very long time to defeat the final boss, especially since he could only play it in his dreams. A girl said that the resistance forces had come to punish him. That statement stunned him, because it was the first line spoken by the protagonist in the opening sequence of Res Noah. He opened his eyes and saw it. The girl drew her sword and swore to fight for her country. She introduced herself as Alexandra, knightly lady, and vowed to take him down. He silently observed her, reflecting on the familiar lines of dialogue and her imposing appearance on the battlefield. She looked exactly like Alex from Res Noah, and this scene he had seen it countless times in his dreams. There was no mistaking it, he muttered. This was the opening of Res Noah. But that was impossible because he thought all this nonsense was just a dream. However, if Alex was here, then she was Res Noah's Alex. And the one standing before her was him. When Alex called him Demon Lord Menas, he realized the most astonishing thing. Oh, that name is Menas Noah, the final boss of Res Noah. But that's also his name. It's hard to believe, but it seems he is the ultimate boss of this world. Alex charged straight at him, using his level 1 swordsmanship skill, Powerful Slash. Menas thought he had seen this attack countless times, and when he stopped the sword with just one finger, Alex was stunned, exclaiming, "What's happening?" Menas coldly asked her how she dared to be disrespectful to him, then pushed her, sending her tumbling backward. He thought to himself, if she charged straight at him like that, of course he would easily block the attack. Alex's teammates rushed over, helped her up, and anxiously asked if she was all right. Then they turned to Alex, scolding her for reminding her countless times not to barge in alone. Alex bowed his head in apology to his teammates, but his eyes still held resentment as he glared at Menas. He thought to himself, she'd better give up and go home. But he knew Alex and Res Noah well. She always said she would never give up. This is really annoying. To be honest, Menas had no interest in their idiotic resistance. He just wanted some peace and quiet to figure out what the hell was going on. But instead, he was attacked so unexpectedly that he couldn't think straight. From what he had learned from the dream, at this point, Alex was only level 5 with basic equipment and skills. And what about him? If this really is a game, then he's the final boss of Res Noah. A game famous for its terrifying difficulty to the point that defeating him has become a separate category in speed races. He is the most powerful final boss in RPG history. Menas understood perfectly well that with Alex's current strength, he couldn't possibly defeat him. It was utterly impossible. And in the end, only Alex survived and left the battle because that's how the storyline unfolds. He sighed, then snapped his fingers, thinking that perhaps scaring her a little for now would be acceptable. From his shadows, a portal emerged, opening to summon Genesis and the Golem Knights. Dozens of warriors emerged from thin air. They formed a formidable army. Menas decided to show the resistance group the disparity in strength, ordering them to surrender immediately. Seeing the army suddenly appear, the resistance fighters were utterly astonished, wondering if all these soldiers had been hiding in the castle all this time. This was the true power of the demon summoning skill. Menas thought their reaction was understandable because they had reason to be surprised. But even so, Alex refused to back down. She insisted that they would not give up, because without overthrowing his cruel rule, the world would have no hope. Immediately, the Resistance's sorcerers began chanting spells. They opened fire simultaneously, attacking the Knight Army. Menas observed it all and realized one thing. No matter how many times he defeated them, they always got up and fought again. They had even studied special strategies just to counter him. They genuinely wanted him dead, but strangely he didn't feel angry at all, just disappointed. Menas thought that, in reality, he had put a great deal of effort into protecting this empire. The land he ruled, the entire Noah Empire, was besieged by 4 hostile nations. They were attacked almost daily, and besides that, a protracted civil war had claimed countless lives and showed no sign of ending. Therefore, he acquired a unique skill, demon summoning, and with this power he unified the country by force, crushing neighboring nations and turning them into vassals. He guessed Alex must have come from one of those countries, but in any case, everything he did was for this empire. However, the more he tried to protect the dynasty, the more enemies he created, and now they've come to take his life. If he remembered correctly from his dreams, one of the key plot points was that the resistance had received support from within the royal court. The prime minister himself escorted Alex into the palace while the royal guards turned a blind eye. Manus suddenly realized something. Every event in the game was happening exactly the same way in this world. From the very beginning, he was destined to be betrayed. This explains everything. That's why Demon Lord Minos in the game has completely lost faith in humanity. He had been betrayed by the very people he tried to protect, and nearly killed. Thinking about it weighed heavily on his heart. Meanwhile, the resistance fighters were thrilled to see their plan working. Believing this was their chance, they rallied to attack, urging each other not to let their guard down until the battle was over, and pouring all their remaining energy into the fight. A knight created a protective shield, but Minos thought to himself that the only thing hurt here was his poor heart. But even that wasn't enough to defeat him. This battle was actually over before it even began. However, he suddenly remembered something important. That's only true for this battle. If this world truly follows the game's storyline, then Alex will never give up. She will continue to fight, trying again and again until she defeats him, until he dies. Minos thought to himself, after all, every final boss has to die eventually. But if he killed her now, would he be able to prolong his own life a little longer? He stared intently at Alex, making her tremble with fear. He knew that a single attack would wipe out the resistance completely. Alex was trembling, and he was acutely aware he could kill her right now. If he did that, he wouldn't die. He wouldn't lose anything either. Just as he was about to snap his fingers to end it all, he suddenly stopped. A thought flashed through his mind. What if the plot changed? If Alex died, would another hero emerge to replace her? Then another one, and another one after that? He's the final boss, the one all of humanity wants to destroy. Even if no one could defeat him, what did he have left to protect? Seikane. Perhaps this is the best outcome. Because if things continue like this, nobody will truly be happy. And when there's nothing left to protect, perhaps this world would be a better place if Demon Lord Minos ended here. Because ultimately, this is the happy ending everyone wanted. Minos uses a level 3 dark magic skill, Mist Shadow. This caused the entire area to be covered in thick smoke. The resistance fighters were bewildered, wondering if this was a smokescreen. He snapped his fingers, and immediately Alex lunged toward him without hesitation. She assumed he was trying to escape and vowed not to let him get away. She thrust her sword straight into him. Blood spurted out. Minos coughed violently when Alex drew his sword. Impossible! He screamed in pain, then he fell down. Everyone was stunned, then immediately wondered, is he dead? Have we won? Alex turned around and looked at everyone. She declared that Demon Lord Minos had been defeated by her. Alexandra, Knight of the Lords. The resistance had won. Cheers erupted. They had defeated the Demon King. They had done it. The world was saved. While the victors were basking in their joy, Minos stood silently in a dark corner observing them. He thought to himself that their happy ending had come sooner than he had imagined. He quietly asked the wolf demon beside him if that was true. The monster let out a low growl. Minos looked down at his pierced body and realized it was just a dummy. The one killed was actually a doppelganger, a Genesis demon capable of shapeshifting. The thick smoke he created wasn't to blind them, but to swap places. As for himself, thanks to Glacia Labolas's stealth skill, he silently vanished into the shadows. Minos chuckled softly, confirming that the plan had succeeded and the resistance had fallen into the trap. However, he couldn't help but be concerned about Alex's reaction. She seemed more upset than he had expected. Anyway, Demon Lord Minos is dead. He took off his mask. He told himself that from now on, he was just old Minos. No one would hunt him anymore, and the whole world wouldn't hate him anymore. He was finally just himself. He turned and left, calling Glacia Labolas, his loyal wolf demon, and ordered her to leave the place. This is the story of how he gave up his role as the final boss. Then he went into a clothing store and tried on a new outfit. The shopkeeper complimented him on how great he looked in the suit. He chuckled with delight. Of course he did. He told himself that not only was he powerful, but he also had good looks and money. Previously, he was a perfect emperor by every standard, and with such a top-notch character design, even if he wore a plastic bag, he would still look incredibly impressive. However, his overly striking appearance might make him more noticeable. Perhaps he should tone down the flamboyance. He decided to buy another cloak, telling the shopkeeper, The owner happily agreed and quoted a total price of 1,000 SIL. Manus suddenly realized that he had never been shopping before, so he had absolutely no concept of the value of money. All his finances had previously been managed by his subordinates. However, in the magazines he read in his dreams, it was stated that 1 SIL was equivalent to approximately 100 Japanese yen. Even so, lacking market knowledge, he couldn't determine if this price was reasonable. Without hesitation, he handed the shopkeeper a bag full of coins, asking if that was enough. The shopkeeper's eyes widened in astonishment. Then, in a panic, he asked if it was gold. She refused, saying she couldn't accept the money. Manus frowned, thinking, "Isn't this enough?" Then he handed her another bag, double the amount of the previous one, and asked if that was enough. The proprietress, startled, shook her head and said that even a single gold coin would be enough to pay 10 times the amount he needed. Manus was surprised, staring at the coins, and asked if that was all. Then he laughed, deciding to change tactics, saying he would take all the clothes and underwear she could give him with the money. The shopkeeper reluctantly agreed, quickly packing the goods and quoting a final price of 1 gold coin. Manus nodded in satisfaction, praising the shopkeeper's good judgment. Then he summoned Shadowhand and ordered it to hold the goods for him. Immediately from within his shadows, countless black hands reached out, seizing the packages. The shadowy hands devoured the goods and vanished without a trace. Manus thought to himself, Shadowhand is a demon that drags people down into the dark realm, but it turns out to be a very convenient way to store things. Just let them slide into its shadow, and everything will be neatly organized. The shopkeeper's eyes widened as he asked where the clothes had gone. Manus just smiled, replying that he had brought his own bag, so she didn't need to worry. He adjusted his cloak, thinking that this was his first time shopping, so he had been a little extravagant. But anyway, they were all useful items, so it was fine. Stepping out of the shop, he blended into the crowd on the street. He looked up at the sky, muttering to himself, Gopher, the capital of the Noah Empire. Before, he could only see this place from the palace, but now he was actually standing in its midst. He slowly observed his surroundings, noticing the unexpectedly bustling scene. Exactly like the ending of Resnoa, everyone was jubilant. The streets lined with large banners bearing the words, Demon Lord Menas is dead. He felt a pang of bitterness. His defeat was the very reason for this joy. But whatever that was, it was all in the past. Now he had given up on being the final boss. He was finally free. He thought it was time to live a new life, a completely different Menas. Just then, an alluring scent wafted into his nose. Manus glanced at a roadside stall, walked over, pointed to the menu, and told the owner he wanted a supersized angelic strawberry crepe or something like that. The owner nodded and replied that a strawberry crepe would be ready right away. He thought to himself, he'd seen crepes in his dreams but never actually tasted them, or even eaten anything from a street vendor like this. He took a bite and was instantly stunned. What the hell is this? Manus called the innkeeper over and, upon learning that he was the one who made it, quickly asked if there was a problem. He nodded vigorously, replying that there was a very big problem. Because the crepes were so delicious, he didn't know how to praise them enough. The owner chuckled, his face beaming with joy and relief. Manus folded his arms, slowly nodded, and said that the owner was very lucky today because he would buy another 100 crepes. No sooner had he finished speaking than he thought to himself that he had overspent again. But shopping was indeed fun. If he had known, he would have given up being the final boss a long time ago. He turned to the wolf demon beside him, offered it a crepe, and told it to try it. The creature sniffed the crepe for a moment, then took a bite, its tail wagging excitedly. Manus asked the wolf demon if it liked crepes too, but as soon as he finished speaking, the owner's eyes widened in astonishment, and he stammered, asking where the crepes had disappeared to. He simply waved his hand, telling the owner not to worry about it. Then, he turned to look at the remaining crepes. I asked the owner if they were the extras he had ordered, and complimented him on his excellent work. He paid, and the owner just shook his head and smiled, saying that he was indeed a strange person. Just then, cheers erupted throughout the street. He frowned and asked what was happening. The innkeeper immediately dismissed the possibility of an attack, then cheerfully explained that the heroes had just returned from battle, telling him to look ahead. Manus turned around and saw the crowd cheering wildly, praising the warriors and wishing them long life and good health. He thought to himself, yes, this is a victory parade, but in the game, there's no such event because Alex is the only survivor. That means his death has completely changed the plot. He asked the innkeeper if the resistance was so popular. The innkeeper immediately nodded, asserting that since they had defeated the tyrannical demon king and saved the world, they were naturally great heroes in the eyes of the people. At that moment, the innkeeper pointed forward, saying that the star of the ceremony had appeared. Lord Alexandra. All eyes were on her. Alex stood on the carriage. He smiled and thanked everyone. Manas looked at her, a strange feeling rising in his heart. Her smile was indeed radiant, but why did he feel something was amiss? He told himself Alex had every reason to smile, but he felt that smile didn't really reach her eyes. He turned away thinking that it wasn't his business anyway. But at that very moment, something on the clock tower caught his attention. A suspicious person was lurking up there. He narrowed his eyes, recognizing an assassin in disguise. That guy probably thought he'd hidden himself well, but in the eyes of someone who'd been through countless battles like him, his weaknesses were all too obvious. He quickly deduced his target must be Alex. Other kingdoms are undoubtedly plotting to sow chaos within the Noah Empire. Now that the throne is vacant, a power vacuum has appeared, and they have a host of reasons to want to remove Alex from this political game. Manus glanced at Alex, realizing she hadn't noticed anything yet. He wondered if he was the only one who had noticed. Instantly, he lunged towards Alex. At the same time, a blinding flash of light emanated from the clock tower. Manus's eyes widened, recognizing immediately it was a mage. At this distance, it was undoubtedly some kind of long-range attack spell. Manus thought that if the guy could use long-range magic, he must be at least level 15, maybe a little higher. If this attack had landed on Alex, she would most likely have been killed instantly. Without hesitation, he immediately jumped up and landed right in front of Alex, astonishing everyone around. Alex was stunned, and was about to ask who he was when the assassin suddenly attacked. The attack struck Manus, creating a massive explosion. When the dust and smoke cleared, Manus was still standing there, completely unharmed. He thought to himself, he had carefully deployed his defenses just now, but that attack was completely useless. This assassin wasn't even a real threat. The thought that some insignificant nobody dared to sabotage the victory parade he had worked so hard to create infuriated him. Now he had gone too far. He decided that Alex didn't need to die. He handed over the empire to her. Therefore, anyone who tries to assassinate Alex is essentially declaring war on him. He chuckled softly, releasing some of his power, then calmly stated that it was a rather good attempt, but to reward such audacity, he would kill the assassin in a single blow. Everyone was stunned by his terrifying power. As the lower-ranking knights fainted in droves, Manus thought that perhaps he had been a little too rough. And now it has caused a scene of chaos. People are running away in panic, screaming loudly. Manus thought to himself he had given up his position as the final boss so he could live as a free man. And as a free man, he didn't need to suppress his emotions. If something annoyed him, he could just smash it. He ordered Glacia la Bola, saying it was time to eat. The beast lunged towards the assassin. This made the guy panic. Upon realizing the wind around him had suddenly turned icy cold, La Bolas revealed himself, ready to devour his attacker. The assassin, stunned, screamed in despair before being swallowed alive by the beast. Manus looked at him, coldly thinking that the man would no longer be able to bother anyone. Therefore, he should leave immediately. But as he turned away, Alex asked him who he was. Manus looked at her. He thought she was naive, weak, and irresponsible. However, perhaps that was inevitable, because this Alex wasn't the Alex from the game. She was still low-ranking, had no truly trustworthy allies, and lacked sufficient mental maturity. But according to what happens in the game, she will become the new queen of the Noah Empire. However, if he continues to leave Alex like this, she will surely die soon. Manus approached her, but a knight immediately warned him to stay away from Lady Alexandra. Alex, frightened, placed his hand on the hilt of his sword, cautiously instructing him not to come any closer. He raised his hand but not to attack, but gently placed it on her shoulder, telling her to try her best, calling her the female lead. Alex was surprised while Manus thought that he didn't care how naive, weak, or irresponsible she was, because as the protagonist, she deserved to sit on the throne. He realized that there couldn't be any more differences between him and her. Alex had a kind heart, a strong sense of justice, and most importantly, people were naturally drawn to her. But he didn't. Manus never possessed that kind of charisma, because he had to rule with an iron fist using force to keep everything under control. That was the only way he knew, but the more he tried to protect the country, the deeper the dynasty sank into despair. Under his rule, this land could never prosper. With this, he officially handed over the role to Alex. He glided past her, but Alex watched him, intending to call him back to speak. However, just as he was about to leave, the surrounding knights immediately ordered that the intruder not be allowed to escape, demanding his immediate capture. Manus jumped down and coldly asked them what right they had to act like that in front of him. He unleashed his power once again, causing all the knights to fall to their knees, completely defenseless. Then he snapped his fingers. His entire body instantly vanished into thin air. Everyone was stunned, searching in bewilderment, urging each other to quickly pursue him, as he couldn't possibly have gone far. But in reality, Glaciolabolas took him away. Manus chuckled softly, praising his loyal monster. Now Alex would be safe. As he passed by her, he secretly sent a Shadow Knight to reside within her shadow. The Shadow Knight was an A-class demon, powerful enough to protect her from any danger. Now he can leave the capital and never look back. He looked back at the town where he was born and raised, feeling a pang of bitterness at having to leave. But at the same time, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he felt true freedom. He ordered Glaciolabolas to set off. With this, Alex, the protagonist, will get the ending she deserves. As for him, this is just the beginning. He doesn't know what the future holds, but the whole world is like a game, and he will enjoy it however he wants. Feeling relaxed, he smiled. The game officially began. After a long journey, he landed in a forest. Gently stroking Glaciolabolas' head, he praised it for doing so well. A true S-class demon is on a different level. Flying such a long distance while simultaneously activating its invisibility skill must have been exhausting. But anyway, they had arrived at their destination. This area was located north of the Noah Empire, the demonic region, the cannibalistic forest. He looked around, thinking that, true to its name, this place was teeming with hideous creatures with a craving for human flesh. But there was one reason he had chosen this place. It is about living a slow, peaceful life. He was crowned at the age of 10, and since then, he has never had a moment's rest. He is constantly immersed in work, never having a moment of peace. The threat from assassins keeps him on high alert, and he has never had a good night's sleep. He always dreamed of a life without assassins, without politics, without resistance. A life that people call a slow-paced life. He looked at Glaciolabolas, saying that freedom awaited them. Thinking back, this was a wild forest. No one could disturb him here. Now was the time to fully enjoy his new life. First, he needed to build a base. He activated his spell, level 9 dark magic, Gravity. Gravity is a spell capable of restricting the movement of all affected enemies. This reduced their movement speed by half for the next 2 turns. But besides that, it was also very useful for leveling the ground. Perfect for building a dwelling. He observed the newly created plot of land, thinking that it could become a beautiful garden. The wildflowers around it could be ideal decorations. His years of experience as a final boss were finally paying off. Next, he intended to summon a demon to assist him. A magic book appeared in his hand, an ancient book of demon summoning. He looked at it, thinking that this book recorded the names of all the demons he had ever defeated or summoned. And now he could summon any demon he had previously defeated or summoned, provided he paid something in return. He snapped his fingers, summoning Genesis, and then conjured a mimic house. It was a cannibalistic house that devoured the unfortunate souls who unwittingly entered. He approached and looked inside, and commented that although they didn't expect it to be fully furnished, but the interior space seemed a bit cramped. What he wanted wasn't a minimalist lifestyle, but a comfortable one. A small house like this was clearly not enough. That means he needs to upgrade Mimic House. He can use his demon summoning ability in 2 different ways. First, he can summon demons from nowhere. That's Genesis. Second, he can merge demons to create a more powerful version. That's Synthesis. By combining these 2 skills, he can summon multiple demons, then merge them together to increase their power. He activated Synthesis, snapped his fingers, and merged the 2 mimic houses. From within the darkness, a mimic mansion appeared. This was no longer a simple cannibalistic house, but a cannibalistic mansion. Once anyone entered, it would invite them to stay, then imprison and devour them completely. He nodded in satisfaction, thinking that this was fine for now and that it was time to move on to the final touches. He summoned Trant tea and sugar mushroom, then plucked them, thinking it best to harvest the ingredients himself. This time he will brew the tea himself using his own strength. After getting ready, he sat down in a chair, sipped his tea, enjoyed the tranquility, and thought to himself that this was the slow-paced life he had always desired. Finally, he had some quality time to himself, the true freedom he had longed for. After all, he was a genius. Of course he could do it. He chuckled with delight, but then he sat alone doing nothing. Suddenly he sighed and said he was very bored. This wasn't like what he had imagined. Perhaps because he had always worked hard from childhood to adulthood, now that he had absolute freedom, he didn't know what to do with himself. He thought he couldn't possibly calm down. Should he go visit his subordinates, the 7 demon princesses? Or perhaps he could try destroying humanity. But then, he told himself that both options were terrible. He didn't want to mix his personal life with his work. Besides, destroying humanity was just a matter of moments, and if he did, he'd have nothing to do but come back here. He felt strange because things weren't as he expected. A slow-paced life sounds wonderful when others talk about it. But now he sits here talking to himself and suddenly feels strangely lonely. He thought, this can't go on like this forever. He'd given up his role as the final boss, so he had to live a new, worthwhile life. And of course, it had to be extraordinary. He ordered Glacia Labolas to set off, and so, on the very first day of enjoying a slow-paced life, he abandoned it to join an adventurers guild. A girl at the reception desk registered his information, confirmed the name Maddie, and he nodded in agreement. She welcomed him to the Adventurers Guild of Oshtown and quickly began the registration process. He agreed, saying it was a great option. Instead of living a slow, solitary life, becoming an adventurer seemed far more interesting. That way, he'd have the chance to visit the sacred places he'd seen in the game. And who knows, he might even find a demon powerful enough to be a worthy opponent. The girl continued writing, age, 20, occupation, demon summoner. The girl looked at the information he had provided and asked for confirmation. He nodded, confident that his profile was perfect, and asked if she was surprised. She continued to check and questioned whether what he had stated was actually true. This surprised him, and he asked for the reason. She explained, and he was a little confused, but still insisted that everything was true. His name was Maddie, and he was indeed a demon summoner. He told her to take a look, then pointed to his demon contract. Glacia Labolas was disguised as an adorable little puppy. The girl saw it and immediately exclaimed how cute it was. He introduced it as Glacia and told her she could pet it if she wanted. She gently stroked it, feeling its soft, tiny fur. But then she suddenly changed her attitude. She seriously told him straight that the paperwork wasn't the problem, but what was more important was his profession. He was a little confused, and she went on to explain that demon summoners were considered a cursed profession. He was shocked to hear her say that summoning demons always dragged the entire party down. Moreover, most demon summoners could now only summon low-level demons, rendering them almost useless in combat. In other words, in the eyes of adventurers, demon summoners were a weak profession and no one wanted to cooperate with them. He immediately retorted, saying that certainly not all demon summoners were so weak, citing the example of the demon lord Menace. The girl nodded, agreeing that Menace was completely different, as he was almost a true demon. She went on to explain that the biggest reason people believe demon summoners bring bad luck is that they are associated with the demon lord Menace. But ultimately, that's just the opinion of the majority. Hearing this, he was even more shocked. The girl said she would temporarily register him as a demon summoner, but advised him to consider another profession, such as a mage or swordsman, because being a demon summoner had no future. He sighed, feeling as if he had been pulled back to reality, but still thanked her for the advice. She went on to explain that he would start at the lowest rank, G rank. With G rank, he was forbidden from entering dangerous areas, such as the cannibal forest. Therefore, he was required to cooperate with adventurers of E rank or higher. He asked if he could start solo. The girl nodded, explaining that it was safety regulations and that as long as he was an intern, he was required to join a team. She suggested the Three Sisters Guidance, a renowned adventurer group known for training new recruits. Interns who applied would be given priority as the group focused primarily on teaching and training. Hearing this, Manus immediately remembered the three sisters of guidance from the game. They were the ones who taught Alex, the protagonist, the basics of combat and adventure. But as their name suggests, their role was limited to the early game tutorial. He immediately refused, believing the three sisters were too weak, lacking real skills, and therefore he had nothing to learn from them. The girl asked curiously, "Are you planning to be their instructor?" He thought to himself, "Actually, I'd rather teach someone with a more unique skill set. It would be far more interesting than a group of people just repeating basic instructions." He glanced around, wondering if anyone fit his description. But all the adventurers around him looked like NPCs, unremarkable characters that appeared everywhere like mushrooms after rain. He sighed, telling himself that this was just the starting area of the game, so most of the people here were just rookies. Even his useless golems were more useful than these people. Just then, everyone pointed at a girl and whispered that she was the one who dared to venture into the cannibalistic forest alone. Another person warned them not to stare at her, because who knows what might happen if they made eye contact. Manus looked at the girl, wondering if she was really that famous. Suddenly, he was so shocked that he screamed, because the girl was looking at him too. He immediately rushed towards her, exclaiming in surprise that it was Miko Rin. The girl was surprised when he suddenly approached, while Manus examined her from head to toe, unable to believe his eyes, muttering that this was her in real life. Not an illusion, not an image on a screen, but a vividly detailed version. The girl frowned, annoyed, and asked him who he was. Manus froze, realizing he had completely forgotten about the possibility of meeting Miko Rin, right at the starting area. In the game, she's incredibly straightforward, most of her dialogue being short, to the point. But it seems she's quite different in real life. This outfit, these perfect facial features like a princess straight out of a fairy tale. There's no doubt about it, this is one of Resnoa's most important characters. Mikolas Pinkheart. Manus is certain she is Mikolas. In the game, she is a character with incredibly powerful potential towards the end. With her unique skill cloth change, she can easily traverse any Demon Realm area without encountering any danger. She is one of Resnoa's three most important characters. When playing games, Manus always had her in his team, so now he finds it hard to believe he's actually meeting her in real life. He can't believe he's actually seeing her. Overwhelmed with excitement, he immediately grabbed her hand, thinking it must be destiny. Then he declared that they would embark on an adventure together. The girl quickly pulled her hand away, annoyed, asking him what was wrong and why she had to go on this adventure with him. She also wondered what the name Miko Rin meant. He just laughed, explaining it was just a nickname, then asserted that even when angry, she still looked adorable because her character design was perfect. Hearing this, she blushed, surprised, and asked him what on earth he was talking about, then protested that he couldn't just arbitrarily give people nicknames like that. But deep down, Manus knew she didn't really hate the nickname. He recalled that in the game, she always appeared tough and strong, but in reality, she was very lonely. She struggled to maintain relationships, and moreover, she had problems with her mother. Suddenly, the owner of the club spoke up, asking him what he was up to. Then she reminded him that Mikol-san was an AC rank adventurer, a veteran. She had surpassed level 10 and was a true expert. She said he should show her respect. Manus frowned slightly, wondering if it was only level 10. He knew this was the starting area, but this limit was too low. Just then, Miko spoke up, saying that, as Anna had said, she was busy training to become stronger, so she didn't have time to babysit, especially a newcomer like him. Unexpectedly, Manus put his finger to her lips, interrupting her and telling her to skip it because her lines were too long. Then he turned to the receptionist and asked what she had called Miko just now. She replied to Michael because her name was Mikol. Miko was about to say more, but Manus interrupted her, asking if he had misheard as they were clearly calling her by the wrong name. Miko was surprised, wondering what he was talking about since the application clearly stated the name Mikol Leonhardt. Manus frowned, asking again what she was talking about because Miko's real name was... Just as he was about to speak, Miko suddenly rushed forward and covered his mouth, shouting to everyone that she had changed her mind, and he could join her team. The entire hall fell silent, staring at them, not understanding what was happening. Manus thought to himself, so on his very first day as an adventurer, he had met Miko Rin and become her teammate. Miko turned to him, warning him not to misunderstand, as she didn't consider him a real member of the team. She said she was just standing there watching him level up. He agreed, telling her to just stand there and observe and learn. Miko frowned, wondering what was wrong with him since he was just an apprentice. Menace asked them where they were going because this was a cannibalistic forest. Suddenly, Miko appeared right in front of him, brandishing her weapon and pointing it directly at him. She coldly asked him who he was and how he knew her name. Menace shrugged, asking if he was obligated to answer. Miko tightened her grip on her weapon, telling him he wouldn't want to know what happened unless he confessed. He gave a wry smile, saying it wasn't that simple. He thought to himself, if he told her the truth, that he knew her through a video game he'd played in a dream, she would never believe him. She asked him to tell her everything he knew about her. He thought she was always so arrogant, but he had no reason to hide it, so it wasn't a problem. He began to speak. Her name was Nicholas Pinkheart. She hailed from the fairy kingdom of Pinkheart and was its only princess. However, due to a disagreement with her mother about the Dragon King Nidhogg, she ran away from home. She was immediately surprised, asking how he knew so much, certain her mother had hired him to find her. He continued, "She's 16 years old this year. Level 11, possesses the light attribute. Her special skill is costume transformation. She's 154 centimeters tall, weighs 41 kilograms, and her measurements are 77, 53, and 75 centimeters. Her birthday is March 5th. She loves flowers and her mother. Her favorite foods are chocolate, bread, and ham pudding. She dislikes crowded places because she feels embarrassed when others see her special skills. Her dream is to fill the world with flowers." Suddenly she told him to stop. Something wasn't right. He asked if he'd said something wrong. But she disagreed, insisting it was absolutely correct, and that was precisely what was strange. He even knew her weight and measurements, so how could he possibly know those things? He calmly replied that the information was in the official strategy manual. She asked in astonishment, could it be that those things have already been published? But that was impossible since he had just mentioned secrets known only to her. He asked again, "Do you mean the dream of covering the world with flowers?" She shrieked in embarrassment, telling him not to mention it again. Even so, she insisted she didn't want to go home yet, and he couldn't force her. He said he had no intention of going home either. He thought to himself, even if he could bring Miko Rin back to the fairy kingdom, there wouldn't be anything interesting to do there. Although he still wanted to be present when the Dragon King Nidhogg launched his attack. She looked at him suspiciously, asking what exactly he intended to do. He replied that he didn't have any particular plans, just wanted to try being an adventurer because after retiring he needed a new hobby. She asked in surprise, "A hobby?" He said that for the time being he wanted to be her student for a while. Then he looked at her expectantly and called her by an unexpected name, Senpai. She looked at him, her face flushed, then agreed, saying she guessed she'd stay even if only to find out who he really was. She said they should start right away, even though she wasn't too serious about it at first, but she would make sure to train him properly. He smirked, saying that was the right spirit, so she should show him how strong she was. She frowned, seriously asking why he acted as if he was better than her. His silence annoyed her, and she said he was making her uncomfortable. He changed the subject, asking if they weren't here to fight monsters. She shook her head, saying there was no fighting today, as the mission only required collecting medicinal herbs. He wondered why she mentioned medicinal herbs. On second thought, he couldn't create them from scratch either, but perhaps one of his 7 demon princesses could. She explained that even when tasked with eliminating monsters, avoiding unnecessary battles was still important. He wondered, shouldn't they just attack any monster they saw? Because that's exactly what he did when playing the game as Alex. She said it was a foolish approach because even if he did, he would only be wasting time, resources, and energy. By the time he found his real target, he might be exhausted. He reflected that blindly charging into battle like Alex was probably a terrible idea. He asked again, "So that means they only kill one monster every few days? How do they get stronger then?" She asked him what he meant. He was surprised, saying, "Didn't you know that too? You level up by fighting monsters." She explained that level was just an indicator of strength. They didn't need to fight constantly. They could become stronger through training and accumulating experience. She retorted, "How come you didn't know that?" No, she continued, if leveling up is only possible by defeating monsters, what about the support players in the party? He immediately replied, "They also gain some experience by participating in battles." She didn't understand how that mechanism worked. He thought it was a good question because he didn't know either. I, he pondered, "It's true they can train to become stronger, but do they really gain experience that way? If this world really is like the game he used to play, then fighting monsters would definitely help them level up much faster." He wondered if anyone here realized this. She wondered if anyone had any common sense. She said that no matter what he was saying, they would avoid fighting the monster. Then she glanced at Glaciolabolas and said that with that summoned monster, there weren't many monsters he could defeat. He told her not to underestimate him because Glaciolabolas could do all sorts of things. He even boasted that it could lift its legs. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "But isn't it just a pet?" She told him to stop joking. He replied that he wasn't joking. She ignored him and said they were about to reach the meadow where they could find the herbs they needed. He suddenly remembered something he wanted to ask earlier. What kind of herb were they looking for? She replied that it was molly, a medicinal plant with white flowers that only grows in the demon forest and only appears in places with the most sunlight. He thought of white flowers in sunny places, and it felt familiar. She said it would probably be better to let him see for himself, since the field of medicinal flowers was right ahead. Suddenly she froze, surprising him, as he asked what was wrong. But she immediately covered his face, muttering that it couldn't be. Manus was also stunned when he saw the mansion he had built there. She stared in astonishment at the strange villa, saying it hadn't been there yesterday. He immediately recognized it as the replica house he had created, and thought to himself that this site was truly rare. I didn't expect him to be discovered so quickly, especially since this place was right in the middle of a demonic territory. Even so, he realized that building the house so close to town for convenience was a mistake. Looking down at the flowers on the ground, he suddenly remembered the trees he had trampled while laying the foundation for the house. Suddenly, Miko coughed softly. He turned to ask what was wrong, but she looked at him in surprise, asking what was wrong with him, because the amount of demonic energy here was so dense. He frowned and asked if it was really that bad. She replied skeptically, saying it was practically overflowing from the other house. He looked towards the villa and said that now that she mentioned it, he felt it was a little too intense. She frowned and said that even in the most demonic areas, there couldn't be this much demonic energy, so this must be the lair of an extremely powerful demon. He was stunned, thinking to himself that he had been exposed because this was his dwelling place. Demonic energy was his source of power, and while relaxing indoors a while earlier, he had unconsciously let it spill out. Usually he controlled it when people were around, but since no one was there, he didn't restrain himself at all. Suddenly, she thoughtfully remarked that this place most likely belonged to one of the 7 demon princes. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "The 7 demon princes?" She nodded seriously, saying that this amount of demonic energy was completely abnormal, and that among the 7 demon princes serving the demon king Menace, this must be the lair of one of them. Manus asked if she was sure, when she admitted that even she found it hard to believe. But she insisted that each demon prince was powerful enough to destroy an entire empire without a hitch. It was rumored that even the weakest among them had reached rank B. He shook his head in disagreement, saying that all 7 demon princes were SS rank. She frowned and asked again, "SS rank? I've never heard of it, as such a ranking doesn't exist." He said that SS rank was right above S, but she still didn't understand, asking if the order was SS after S, then what else? There was no clear rule. He only knew that there was no way to explain it logically. She decided to put that aside, saying that if there really was a demon prince here, then the town of Osh was in danger. He instinctively asked about the town again, when she emphasized that the demon king Menace had only recently been killed, so the demon princes were surely planning revenge against the empire. He pondered the idea of an empire, but she immediately dismissed it, saying that might not be enough for them. Perhaps they were plotting to wipe out all of humanity. He was stunned to hear that, realizing that the witch hunt targeting the 7 demon princes was becoming more serious. But at this point, he couldn't simply admit that this was his home, as he had gone too far. She told him they needed to return quickly and inform the council, and the mission was temporarily postponed. She turned to Menas and reminded him to stay close and be careful. But at that moment, she suddenly stopped when a Trent appeared behind them. Both were astonished to see it. She wondered why this creature was here when the Trents never left their natural habitat. He thought to himself that he had summoned it, only to get its leaves for tea. But at that very moment, the monster suddenly lunged forward, intending to attack them. He quickly lifted her up and jumped away. He said it seemed to have gone mad, which startled her, prompting her to ask again. He set her down and asked if she was all right. When she confirmed that everything was all right, he immediately reflected on the situation. It shouldn't have behaved like this in front of its owner. It showed that it had completely lost control. And the reason is probably the sugar mushroom he summoned along with it. The spores of the sugar mushroom can cause all sorts of adverse status effects, and when affected, the monster will go berserk. They attack any human they encounter like rabid beasts. He sighed, realizing this was indeed a problem. But he decided that no matter how troublesome it was, he would destroy them. She looked at him in astonishment, asking if he really intended to fight them. She stopped him, asking if he was crazy for having so many monsters. She told him that Trent was a C-class monster and no human could possibly defeat one. He was surprised and retorted that a C-level monster that weak couldn't possibly be scary. But she stated seriously that the minimum level required to confront a C-class monster is level 20, and no one in the world even comes close to that number. He recalled what Anna had said, then thought to himself. Initially, he thought the people in this world might be slightly weaker than him, but it turned out he was wrong. The people here are much weaker than he imagined. He guessed he should have realized that sooner. Nobody in this world actually bothered to hunt monsters, so they didn't know about leveling up. He continued to ponder. In the video game, the Demon King Menace constantly unleashed hordes of demons across the world. But in this world, it wasn't like that. Encounters with monsters were incredibly rare, so naturally, no one thought about leveling up. Then he suddenly realized something. In the game, they started at level 5 but immediately led the resistance forces. The characters who joined later were also only levels between 5 and 10. He suddenly understood everything. At that moment, Miko clenched her fists. He looked at her, and she seriously told him to listen carefully. She said that since neither of them was far from reaching level 20, it was impossible to face a Trent and countless plant swords at the same time. It was hopeless. He was about to speak when she stopped him with magic, ordering him to flee. He told her she didn't have to, but she insisted it was the only way. If they fought, they would both surely lose miserably. One of them had to run, and the wise choice was for him to leave. She reassured him, telling him not to worry, that she wouldn't die here. Trent was strong but not fast. She just needed to wait for the right opportunity to escape. But he saw her hands trembling with fear. There was no chance. She knew that very well. This battle wouldn't end well for her. He couldn't understand it. So he asked why she would do this when she barely knew him. She chuckled softly, saying it was a good question. But in any case, they were teammates, and her job was to protect him. He was surprised when she yelled at him to run away. Immediately afterward, she activated her level 2 light magic skill. Lightning Wall. A wall of light appeared, but Trent immediately delivered a powerful blow, shattering it in an instant. She was stunned, unable to believe her defensive wall had been breached so easily. As the monster prepared to swing its arm to attack, Manus lunged forward to block the blow, angrily asking if she really wanted to die. She stared at him wide-eyed, not understanding how he had done it. But before she could ask, he pushed the monster away. He thought to himself, first it was Alex, and now it's her turn. Everyone in this world is so weak, yet they rush headlong into confrontations with opponents stronger than themselves without hesitation. That was incredibly reckless. He had to admit they were quite brave, though. Still in shock, she asked how he managed to block that attack, but then she said it didn't matter anymore, as long as he ran away as she had told him to. Manus handed Glazia to her, sighing softly and apologizing for ruining her moment. But he also stated frankly that the option to flee was not on his list of commands. He calmly advanced toward the monster, thinking that if anyone asked, he would simply say one thing: fleeing meant defeat. He raised his voice, saying that anyone who dared attack their summoner was utterly despicable. Furthermore, except for the protagonist and the final boss, he will personally handle this monster. No matter who it is, he has never lost. The monster was preparing to attack again, but when Miko shouted for him to be careful, then the blow was imminent. At that moment, he activated his boundary-breaking skill. The gaze of Medusa. The moment his gaze met the monster's, it instantly froze in place. She asked in astonishment if it had stopped. He calmly replied that he had just frozen its time. This is a skill that can freeze all affected enemies for 60 seconds. This skill originates from a type of serpent demon called the Clockwork Serpent. He uses his demon fusion ability to merge various types of demons into his body, but to maintain his human form, he He must seal all of that power with a special skill. If he loosens the seal even slightly, he can use any of the demon's abilities within his body. By the way, if he completely released the seal, his body would transform entirely into a different entity. But for these weaklings, that's completely unnecessary. He said, "All right, let's finish this quickly." Immediately afterward, he activated his skill, boundary-breaking Death's Scythe. A giant scythe appeared in his hand. He pondered over this skill, the Grim Reaper's Death Scythe. It didn't strike the body, but directly severed the soul, killing the enemy instantly. Its accuracy rate is very low, but with the enemy completely frozen, slipping is impossible. One blow is enough. In the blink of an eye, he finished off Trent. Miko was stunned, stammering as she asked what skill he had just used. A C-rank monster taken down with a single blow. Just then, the sword-shaped flowers flew towards her. He then ordered Glacia to finish cleaning up. Glacia leaped into the air. Its body transformed back into its true form. It swung its claws, using its skills to annihilate all the flower-wielding creatures in an instant. Manus patted Glacia on the head, praising it for doing a great job. Then he turned to look at Miko, noticing the strange expression on her face. She asked, "Why is this dog so big? Why are these two people so strong? This is completely illogical." He thought to himself, this is a big problem. It seems he's gone too far. Despite trying to restrain his power, the result is still overwhelming. Now, how is he going to explain this? He told Miko to calm down, that he could explain. But before they could finish speaking, both of them were startled. When a massive surge of energy erupted from deep within the forest, the tremor was so strong that Miko couldn't understand what it was. That energy is becoming increasingly intense and powerful. It was like a tsunami sweeping through everything. Miko couldn't bear it. She fainted on the spot due to the overwhelming pressure. Perhaps Miko's unconsciousness was a good thing. If she had remained conscious and faced this terrifying energy, her mind might not have been able to withstand it, and would have completely collapsed. He realized this was bad. It seemed this thing was attracted by his presence, but whatever it was clearly not ordinary. He gritted his teeth, thinking that Miko shouldn't have been here. Now he had to find a way to leave this place immediately. Suddenly, the appearance of the vines caught his attention. They began to wrap around each other, twisting tightly together. Then a man came out from inside. The man immediately knelt on one knee before him, flashing a mysterious smile, and said that he had bitten him. He bowed, calling Manas your parasite. Manas stared at the newcomer while the man maintained his smile. He went on to say that while patrolling his assigned territory, he had sensed Manas's presence, so he had come here to pay his respects. Manus responded with a compliment, but deep down, he felt the situation was truly terrible. It couldn't get any worse. Why him of all people? One of his closest attendants, the 5th ranked of the 7 demon lords, Upir, Lord of Arbor. Upir is a world trant, the ruler of all plant demons and responsible for protecting the Empire's forests. He was born from the earth itself, the embodiment of the world tree. His rank was SS, the highest rank achievable. Although the Trents Manas had just faced were distant relatives of his, they were no match for Upir in terms of power. Upir was one of the strongest characters in Resnoa. He asked, his voice filled with curiosity. In a place like this, with a person like that, what is Manus doing? Manus remained silent. He secretly thought that this situation was terrible. He was caught by his own subordinates while walking with a girl. He hastily told Upir that he could explain, that things weren't as he thought. Upir immediately interrupted, saying there was no need for any explanation. As a loyal and devoted follower, he understood Manas's intentions perfectly. Manus was surprised when Upir continued, that he was his lord, and that he was merely selecting the good apples before discarding the vermin that were polluting the world. He asked if that wasn't the noble goal Manus was striving for. Upir continued, asking if he could be of any help. If Manus wished, he could make the forest devour several towns at once, for Manas's will was his command. Manus thought to himself, this is it. This is why he didn't want Upir to find him. Upir admired Manus to an excessive degree. What lofty goal was that? Even now, Manus wasn't truly Upir's master. Like the other demon lords in the group of 7, Upir was originally created from nothing by Manus using his demon summoning skill. He was the one who created Upir and all the others. He told Upir that it wasn't necessary and that he hadn't come there for that reason. But that didn't mean Upir could just go and destroy the towns on his own. Upir then asked what the real reason was. Minos thought to himself that he needed to come up with an excuse, then said that, in fact, he had come here to say that he had abdicated the position of emperor. Upir was surprised and asked if he had misheard. Minos confirmed that he had given up. Upir didn't understand and asked why, after all his efforts to protect the empire, he would do that. Minos said that while the resistance was staging the coup, he suddenly thought that perhaps things would be better this way. Hearing this, Upir became angry and asked if the resistance had staged a coup. The trees began to sway as he chuckled, saying that those arrogant humans were ridiculous. They didn't know that their very existence could be wiped out at any moment. But don't worry, he would uproot them like the weak weeds they were. Minos thought to himself that he should forget about the empire. If things continued like this, Upir would wipe out all of humanity. In terms of sheer power, Upir ranks 5th among the demon lords. But with his plant domination skill, he can engulf an entire planet in plague, or cause all the crops humanity needs to survive to wither. Therefore, when it comes to destroying humanity, Upir is almost the most powerful. Most people in this world are of a low level, so, as he said, they will indeed be uprooted. Minos then told Upir to calm down, explaining that he was abdicating the throne of his own free will. The workload was too much, and he wanted to try something new. Upir ordered the trees to wither, and immediately all the trees in the area began to shed their leaves. He said that all who dared harm his master would perish and rot away. Minos looked at him, thinking to himself that he was trustworthy, but the way he acted didn't help at all. There was no other option. Minos snapped his fingers and then spoke, calling out, "5th seat Upir, Lord of Plants, I command you to stop." Upir immediately stopped at the command, standing still as if turned to stone. Minos approached him. He said he had misunderstood everything. He did say he was abdicating the throne, but the Noah Empire still belonged to him. Upir was about to speak, but Minos interrupted him, saying that of course people would rebel against him because that was their nature. He couldn't bother with every little rebellion, so he would just leave them alone. Minos asked again if Upir understood, but Upir remained silent. He snapped his fingers, and instantly all the trees grew back as if nothing had ever happened. He said, "Okay, if that's what Minos wants." Upir, enraged, snarled that those insignificant humans should be grateful for his master's lenience. Minos thought to himself, "It seems the extermination of humanity has been put on hold. How strange. He used to be the final boss, yet now he's stuck in saving the world." Upir continued, saying that if he had truly voluntarily relinquished the throne, then what did he intend to do now? Minos said he was still figuring that out. The only thing he was sure of was that he wanted to be free. Then, suddenly remembering something, he inquired about the Empire's defenses. Upir reported that he had diligently maintained the Empire's border defenses and regularly patrolled. So, did Minos want to adjust the defense strategy? He told Upir to let him think, because as long as the demon princes continued to do their job well, the safety of the Empire wouldn't be an issue. Although he was no longer Emperor Noah, he had protected it for many years. If he now allowed the surrounding nations to invade, all his efforts would be meaningless, and he couldn't accept that. On the other hand, if the people discovered that the 7 demon princes were helping Alex, the newly crowned queen, they might think that she was just like him and would suffer the same fate. Therefore, he ordered Upir to continue guarding the Noah Empire's forest. But from now on, the 7 demon princes must cease all public activities. All actions from now on must be kept secret. They must now protect the Empire from the shadows, unlike before. He asked if Upir could do it, and Upir bowed before him, replying that it would be his honor. He agreed that handing the land over to those weak humans would certainly cause all sorts of trouble. Therefore, it would be best if they themselves protected it because his orders were absolute. Minos said that's what he wanted to hear. As for the other demon princes, he could send a demon to deliver the order. Upir asked if he needed a messenger. Why not arrange a meeting with the 4th seat? Minos asked if he was referring to Primo. Upir nodded in confirmation. Upir explained that Primo, the demon prince holding the 4th seat among the 7 demon princes, was the Lord of Destruction. As her title suggested, she had a penchant for destruction, but was also an indispensable part of his forces. He was certain she would be very useful. Furthermore, with her unique skill, she was the perfect person to deliver orders to all 7 demon princes at once. Minos asked her if she always possessed that skill. Upir confirmed and explained that the 4th seat had created a network centered around itself. Through this, the 7 demon princes could share information related to the Empire's defenses. Minos thought no one had ever told him about this network before. If they were using it to coordinate defenses, then he should also be a part of it. He wondered if he was being abandoned and felt a pang of sadness. At that moment, Upir said that if he wanted freedom of movement, he would certainly have to restrain himself to avoid attracting attention. Otherwise, he might be forced to act in a way that would hinder his newfound freedom. Therefore, if anyone dares to oppose him, contact the fourth seat immediately. As a loyal servant, Upir will eliminate anyone who stands in their way. Because Menace is the noblest creature in the world, he deserves absolute freedom. Upir then said that he had just come up with a brilliant idea to ensure Menace had the greatest freedom and comfort. Why doesn't he rule this world from the shadows, shaping it according to his will? Wouldn't that be a more fitting tune for him? Menace was surprised when Upir said they could end human ignorance. He quickly said they wouldn't destroy humanity, so Upir should abandon the idea. But when he thought about ruling the world from the shadows, suddenly Miko started to stir, startling him. It seemed she was about to wake up, and if she did, he really wouldn't know how to explain it. Miko moaned and mumbled in her sleep, calling him mother. He immediately replied that he wasn't her mother. Seeing her still fast asleep, he heard her mention Trent. He reassured her that she didn't need to worry about Trent anymore, and should just keep sleeping. In her drowsy state, she asked if he really meant it, and he confirmed it. He thought he needed to concoct a cover story, so it was best if she didn't wake up now. She was silent for a moment, then whispered her thanks to him. He was surprised to hear that. Looking down at her, he recalled Upir's words, that he could rule the world from the shadows. The idea wasn't bad at all. By giving up his role as the final boss, he didn't know how the storyline would unfold. Some characters who could have survived in Resnoa might now die. There's a possibility the demons will overwhelm and wipe out humanity. Too many things could go awry. But if he can control things in some way, then even if he has to pull the strings from behind, just as he changed his own destiny, he can also make a difference for everyone else. He chuckled softly, saying that this game seemed quite interesting. Upir was astonished by his power, while Manas thought that he had been a little lost before, realizing that a life of ease wasn't right for him, but now things were gradually falling into place. He just needed to clean up this mess. He picked up the sugar fungus, and Upir recognized it and asked if it was a sugar fungus, saying that it was frightened and that's why it was spraying spores everywhere. Upir offered to help him deal with it. Manas laughed, saying he had just come up with a brilliant idea. He asked Upir if it was possible to grow them. A few moly mushrooms, no. At the shop, Anna was amazed to see this year's harvest, saying that the quality of the moly mushrooms was surprisingly high. In fact, upon closer inspection, she could hardly believe her eyes. These were the finest moly mushrooms she had ever seen. Miko agreed, saying that this year's harvest was exceptionally bountiful, even excessively so by normal circumstances. She explained that not a single mushroom had been trampled by demons or eaten by insects, as if the entire field were perfectly protected. Anna, curious, asked if there was anything suspicious. Miko replied that she only saw a sugar mushroom wandering around, and otherwise nothing unusual. Anna asked Manas if he had noticed anything strange. He replied that, as Miko said, nothing had happened. But in his mind, he thought that to ensure he could enjoy his new life peacefully and comfortably, he had to make it look like nothing had ever happened there. If news of what really happened there were to reach the ears of other adventurers, he would lose his advantage from the start, and that's something he couldn't let happen. So he destroyed Mimic Mansion and Trent, then used Shadow Hands and Shadow Realm to hide all the rubble. As for what happened, he blamed it all on the sugar mushroom's sugar rush ability, saying it was all just a hallucination. Regarding the moly mushrooms, since he was the one who trampled most of them, he asked Upir to use his plant command skill to grow a new batch. Then they restored the forest and adjusted the levels of miasma in the air. And when Miko woke up, everything was back to normal, as if nothing had ever happened. What? Miko insisted that she definitely had something there. She stared at Manas, making him flinch slightly, then asked her what was wrong. Miko suspiciously said something was wrong, and she was sure it was him. Manas was shocked, hastily asserting his innocence. He swore he hadn't done anything, and then asked if she thought he had done anything, and if so, where was the evidence? Miko narrowed her eyes at him, saying that now he sounded even more suspicious. She glared at him and asked if the sugar fungus spores had really knocked her unconscious. Then why was he completely unharmed? That was truly suspicious. She went on to say that even in her hallucinations, he did all sorts of extraordinary things. And he was also She hesitated, repeating the word, like, which piqued Manas's curiosity and prompted him to ask further. Miko mumbled awkwardly that he looked quite handsome. Manas stared at her for a moment, then immediately turned away, his face flushed. Noticing his reaction, Miko lightly punched him. She loudly protested that it was just a hallucination, that he was completely different in real life. Manas narrowed her eyes and asked, "So you think he's handsome?" Miko quickly told him to stop blushing and demanded that he erase that silly smile. She continued to attack him while wondering how he managed to dodge them all. Suddenly, they both stopped as a group of people entered the hall. They looked urgent and said they needed help. The Slug Kingdom from the east is invading the Noah Empire. Everyone was astonished, exclaiming the name Snail Kingdom. Miko said that the border with that kingdom was quite close, so were they under attack? Manas calmly asked, "Is that all?" Miko, astonished, retorted, "What did he mean by, 'that's all'? Does he know how bad the situation is?" Manas thought to himself, "For the Empire, this is just another ordinary day." Anna explained that previously the majority of their defenses were handled by demons under the command of Demon King Menas. Now that Menas was dead, they must have thought the Empire was vulnerable to attack. Miko wondered, didn't they know that the Empire had appointed a new empress and even had a new army? Wouldn't that be fine? Anna shook her head, saying that the new emperor was still busy consolidating his power in the capital, Gopher, so establishing a defense system might take some time. Miko was bewildered. Did that mean the town was practically doomed? Manus calmly said that he wasn't too worried. Miko was surprised to hear that, while Manus secretly thought that the 7 great demon kings were still guarding the Empire's borders. The Snail Kingdom might be marching here, but they wouldn't get far. As Manus was thinking this, Miko asked him what he meant, shaking him vigorously as she did so. Manus looked at her, thinking to himself that he understood why Miko, Rin, and the others were worried. In the game, Alex's resistance forces are a formidable force. After the coup, they have almost become the regular army of the Empire. Numerous efforts have been made to establish diplomatic relations, so in the original storyline, the new Noah Empire experienced a period of peace. But now, because he's interfered with the plot, all of that has vanished into thin air. Until now, the presence of the Supreme Demon Lord Menas had always been a powerful military deterrent. But now that he's disappeared, war could break out at any moment. If the entire world were to attack the Empire simultaneously, no matter how great Noah might be, he would not be able to escape damage. And more importantly, he would no longer be able to move freely as before. Menas sighed, muttering that freedom turned out to be not as simple as he had imagined. Then he chuckled softly, thinking to himself that it seemed the time had come to act from the shadows, just as Upir had said. Just then, Upir appeared on the roof. He silently observed Menas. He thought that when Menas announced his abdication, it happened so suddenly that he didn't have time to offer his heartfelt congratulations. But compared to when he was on the throne, Menas now seems much happier. Upir smiled at him and then quietly disappeared. Menas turned to the receptionist and asked how far the Snail Kingdom had advanced into the territory. She said they must have reached the Deeplands. Hearing this, Menas muttered softly, thinking that the Deeplands were under the control of the 4th seat holder Primo. Coincidentally, he had just been planning to visit her. Miko said that they would reach the town sooner or later, so they needed to evacuate everyone and leave immediately. She asked Menas to come along, but he simply replied, "Okay." Then he said he would stop by the Deepland for a while. She asked why and told him to wait, calling him back. But Menas flew straight to the Deeplands. In the Deepland, the 2 armies faced each other, explosions echoing everywhere. The commander-in-chief of the Noah Empire's border defense forces, Vagan Zoel, stood in the middle of the battlefield, unable to believe his eyes. He thought they were too strong. In terms of both numbers and skill, they were far superior to his army. This army was overwhelming, leaving them with absolutely no chance of resistance. He couldn't understand why a small kingdom like the Snail Kingdom could mobilize such a large force. Their most experienced soldiers were only around level 5, but with the current firepower, the strongest ones have certainly reached level 10. He gritted his teeth, realizing that just as he feared, there was a traitor within the resistance ranks. Someone secretly provided inside information, helping the enemy prepare for this attack even before the coup took place, just waiting for the right moment to strike. Suddenly, the army of the Snail Kingdom opened fire simultaneously. The protective barrier shook violently. As 2nd and 3rd tier spells continuously rained down, a soldier frantically reported that the barrier could not hold out much longer. He asked if it was possible to reinforce the area, but was told it was impossible because their mages had run out of magic power. There was nothing they could do. He clenched his fists tightly. He ordered the soldiers to contact the lieutenant general, requesting the withdrawal of all key forces and their regrouping in one of the nearby towns. When asked what he would do, he drew his sword, his eyes resolute. He knew someone had to hold back the enemy to ensure his own troops could retreat safely. And he is ready to take on this task. Order everyone to leave. He charged straight towards the enemy. As he ran, he silently apologized to his comrades, thinking that they had entrusted their lives to him, but this was all he could do for them at this moment. He's level 21, so at least in terms of strength, he still has the advantage. He can hold off the enemy, even if only for a short time. But facing an entire powerful army, how long can he hold out alone? Is there anything here that could turn the tide of this battle? Something that could give him a chance? Someone. Suddenly he remembered, Demon Lord Manos. Even such a meticulously planned attack was nothing to him. Yes, Manos was a ruthless tyrant, but also the most powerful ruler the world had ever known. If Demon Lord Manos were still alive, the soldiers called out General Vagan's name, saying they would stand by his side. He looked at them in surprise, asking why they were there. They all smiled at him, saying that if they stayed together, they could buy themselves a little more time. If he dared to risk his life to save them, they would be willing to do the same for him. He was silent for a moment, then called them fools. But at this point, there was no turning back. He asked again if they were willing to fight alongside him, and they all unanimously agreed. He shouted, ordering his comrades to charge forward. Tonight, they would die in hell for the Empire. The entire army charged straight ahead. A fleeting thought of the tyrant still lingered in his mind. A moment of weakness, but his mission was not yet over. Many people still relied on his protection even now. He roared, declaring that he was revenge, and demanded that the traitors of the Snail Kingdom listen. If they wanted to win today, they would first have to step over his dead body. He used the skill of provoking battle qui. It attracted the full attention of the enemy. The entire enemy army charged at him and his men. He thought to himself, this would concentrate all their firepower here. This gives the main force enough time to retreat and regroup. If they can lure the enemy into a defensive trap, they can hold out until Queen Alexandra arrives with reinforcements. He may have no hope of survival, but he can still buy himself every precious minute and second. And because of that, he and these brave soldiers are ready to sacrifice themselves. At that moment, Manos unleashed a level 8 dark magic spell. Disable all attacks? It made everything vanish into thin air. The entire battlefield fell silent. Everyone was astonished. The Snail Kingdom's army panicked, asking what was happening and ordering the mages to attack immediately. But the mages reported, astonished, that their magic was no longer effective. Vagan's eyes widened, and he exclaimed in disbelief. He looked up, and at that very moment, a figure descended from the sky and landed in front of him. The entire battlefield fell silent, all eyes fixed on the newcomer. Manos swept his cold gaze across them all. Vagan's whole body trembled, fear consuming every cell of his being. The soldiers around were in a commotion, astonished and not knowing who the person was or where they had come from. One soldier shouted that they needed to kill them all, but the mages panicked because their magic was useless. Manos silently raised his hand, activating his skill, breaking the limits. A gigantic magic circle appeared in the sky. Vagan's eyes widened in horror, thinking this was impossible. Such things only existed in myths and legends. Immediately afterward, Manos cast a level 10 spell. Great Earth Destruction. The ground shook violently. Huge rocks fell from above, causing a series of massive explosions. The entire battlefield shook violently. Because of its devastating destructive power, Vagan was thrown from his horse. When the dust settled, he groaned in pain. His companions rushed to him, anxiously asking if he was all right. He said that it seemed they were all still alive. A soldier whispered, still in shock, wondering what on earth had just happened. Vagan stared at the enormous pit before him and felt shocked. Everything he had just witnessed was the result of a single magical act. He couldn't believe it. The highest level of magic a human could achieve was only level 5. How could there be such a thing as level 10 magic? This power was like a god descending to Earth. He looked towards the cloaked figure, wondering who he was. But then a thought flashed through my mind. No way, this is impossible. If that person really is a god... While Vagan was still in shock, Minas, standing on Glasia's back, chuckled softly and said, "Well, that's it then, isn't it?" He bent down and asked Glacia if she thought so, since it looked quite similar to him. Glacia barked happily. Minas thought to himself, with things like this, the invaders would surely give up for a long time. If he had to act, he might as well make it impressive. He gazed at the deep trenches created by the Great Earth Annihilation, then nodded in satisfaction. Both realistic and beautiful, a true masterpiece. That's enough crafting for a whole day, he chuckled to himself. He turned to Glacia, saying that they were here to find Primo, so it was time to leave. Following that event, a legend spread far and wide about how Vagan Zol had fought against the Slug Kingdom with only 4 men. He was granted the title Vengeance the Grace, a name renowned throughout the Empire. But that's a story for another time. As he glided through the sky, Menas muttered to himself, realizing that this place had almost no notable landmarks. It seemed the search would take a considerable amount of time. It's no coincidence that this place is called Fathomless Flats. He looked around and memories from 10 years ago suddenly flooded back, when this place was once a prosperous kingdom. But then, it was all wiped out by Primo, the Lord of Destruction. The remaining ruins seemed to be being swallowed up by the very land itself. That's why this area is called Fathomless Flats. Okay, so where's today's lady? Minas activates his mana radar skill, scanning the entire area. But nothing clear was found. He thought, as expected, Primo was indeed a formidable opponent. Her disorganized nature made searching even more difficult, even with his magic detecting skills. Menas sighed, thinking that he really should join the network of demon lords that Upir had mentioned. Suddenly, Gladia noticed something and barked. When I looked in his direction, they saw a girl standing opposite the soldiers. The soldiers were surprised, wondering if it was a child and questioning why she was there. The girl trembled, softly warning them that for their own safety, they should stay on their side of the border. She warned them that if they came any closer... But before she could finish her sentence, the archers and mages had already targeted her. Then they attacked immediately. The attack hit its target. This caused her to scream in pain and fall down. Seeing that scene, the soldiers concluded that the target had been neutralized, but they still wondered who she was. Manus observed the situation and thought that, at first glance, Primo looked like just an ordinary girl. But appearances can be deceiving. At that moment, Primo stood up as if nothing had happened, complaining that they didn't need to treat her so roughly. Haida! The entire army was horrified and astonished to see the girl who had just been killed come back to life right before their eyes. Her true identity was finally revealed. Primo, the 4th of the 7 demon princesses, Lord of Destruction. She wasn't human, but a proto-slime. Primo is the ancestor of all slimes and the primordial creature of this world. All other creatures originate from her species. Primo's special ability allows her body to transform into any shape she desires, and with the properties of a proto-slime, her body could regenerate itself instantly. As soon as the regeneration process was complete, Primo happily declared that she was healthy again. The soldiers, however, turned pale, calling her a monster. Nevertheless, they tried to calm each other, reminding each other that she was just a child, and they could easily defeat her. They all charged forward to attack, but at that moment, Primo became serious, warning that they couldn't say she hadn't warned them beforehand. Suddenly, a multitude of vines emerged from her body. As a soldier was about to strike her, Primo vanished in the blink of an eye. In the next moment, she was behind them, gently swinging her arm. The soldiers' bodies were sliced into tiny pieces. Blood was splattered everywhere. Witnessing the horrific scene, the surviving soldiers screamed in terror, their bodies trembling. Some turned and ran, shouting at each other, asking who she really was. Primo was confused, not understanding why they were running away. Then she took a deep breath. In the blink of an eye, she created a massive beam of light, fired directly at those who are fleeing. Whoever that terrifying beam of light touched would instantly vaporize, vanishing completely, leaving not even a trace of ash. Manus observed the scene before him and recognized it as Primo's disintegration ray, a beam of light capable of obliterating everything it touches. He guessed that Primo never intended to take prisoners, but if she were less aggressive, she might be the most likable demon lord among them. Perhaps this is a lingering trace from when Primo was just a weak slime. In reality, she was very shy and hated conflict, a demon who loved peace more than anything in the world. Therefore, anyone who threatens her peace is immediately eliminated. If it could bring her peace, she would do it even if it meant destroying the whole world. And that's why she bears the title of Lord of Destruction. Manus slowly descended to the ground, heading towards Primo. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw him. Suddenly, she rushed forward and hugged him excitedly. Primo exclaimed, unable to believe he was actually there, as it had been so long. She pressed close to him, took a deep breath, then smiled brightly, saying that he still smelled just as good as before. Manus thought to himself that she always acted like a little animal. From the name Primo alone, it's clear she's the first demon he summoned. They've known each other for almost 15 years. Primo said that the moment the ground cracked open, she had a feeling it was him. Manus nodded in confirmation. Her eyes widened in astonishment. Suddenly, Primo apologized, saying she had made a mess everywhere and would clean it up immediately. She summoned the mini Primo squad. These tiny creatures, resembling mice but with mucus oozing from their bodies, jump around. Primo ordered them to clean everything up immediately, as their master was present. The mini Primos began clearing the battlefield. Manus observed them, thinking to himself that they looked cute, but were actually tasked with handling corpses. A rather gruesome job if you thought about it carefully. After they finished, Primo said with satisfaction that everything was fine. She turned to ask Manus if something was wrong, as it was rare for him to take the initiative to come and see her. Manus said that he had abdicated the throne, so from now on he would need her more. Primo's eyes widened in surprise, and she asked him again what he had just said. He calmly repeated that he had abdicated the throne. She was speechless for a moment. He thought this reaction was exactly as he had predicted. Primo shook her head, saying she couldn't understand. What had happened? Because she had never imagined he would suddenly give up everything like that. He told her that he had actually found a successor and had arranged everything. He simply wanted to enjoy his freedom. Primo asked if that was true, but if he needs her by his side, then from now on she can help him with everything. She giggled, saying she was very happy. Manus looked at her and smiled back. He said that he had spoken to Upir before, but couldn't get in touch with her. Upir had said that all 7 demon lords were connected through a special network. Primo replied that she hadn't received any messages from Upir because she had turned him off notifications. Manus sighed, saying he understood what she was thinking, but there was no need to bully Upir like that. Primo quickly denied it, saying that wasn't the case because neither of them bullied the other. Manus nodded, then asked her to reopen Upir's message and send a message to all 7 demon lords, announcing that he had abdicated the throne. They should continue to protect the Empire from the shadows. Manus asked if she could do that for him. He said he was worried some of them might misunderstand and decide to wipe out humanity. Primo agreed. Then she picked up a mini Primo and asked it to help deliver a message to the 7 demon lords. The mini Primo screamed in terror, begging her not to eat it, but Primo reassured her that she wouldn't eat anyone today. Manus wondered curiously, what about other days? Primo then reminded Mini Primo that its mission was to send a message to the 7 demon lords that their master had abdicated the throne, but they still had to continue protecting the Empire in secret. Mini Primo immediately agreed and carried out the task. After a while, Primo informed Manus that the task was completed. Manus was surprised by how quickly the process unfolded, but Primo explained that all Mini Primos shared a common consciousness. So all she had to do was speak to one Mini Primo, and all the demon lords would receive the message through their own Mini Primo. Manus exclaimed how convenient this was. Shortly afterward, Primo received a reply from one of the demon lords. It was Upir who immediately asked why she had been ignoring his messages all this time. Looking at the message, Primo told Manus that the message he had just received was definitely from Upir. Upir insisted that she could hear him, so he asked her to answer his question. Immediately, Primo crushed Mini Primo in his hand. Then he turned to Manus and explained that this was how they communicated. Manus agreed, noting that this method was very useful in many different ways. Then Primo asked Manus if she could stay by his side from now on. "And will you take care of him for the rest of this time?" When he nodded in agreement, she happily hummed a delightful tune. Manus looked at her with a puzzled expression, wondering if that was the only thing she wanted to ask. Primo replied that there was still something else. She wanted to know what would happen to the area's defense system. She said that recently the Snail Kingdom seemed to be encroaching on this land, but thanks to the ravines that Manus had created, the situation would probably stabilize for a while. Therefore, she could leave for a short time. However, in the future, the issue of defense still needed to be considered. Manus acknowledged that this was a point worth considering. He thought he had ensured the borders of the Snail Kingdom ended in steep cliffs, but of course he had left high roads, so that if they were truly determined to invade, sooner or later they would turn back right to his doorstep. He thought the Snail Kingdom wasn't a major threat, but it seemed they were a serious problem for Alex and her new empire. It was highly likely she wouldn't be able to hold her off, so if he didn't balance the world for her, she wouldn't be able to survive. He wondered why the main character always brought trouble. Then Mena said he thought everything would be all right and asked Primo to leave with him. She agreed and asked where their next destination was. He laughed, saying it was obvious. They would go to other countries because it was time to put an end to this game. Meanwhile, in the Snail Kingdom, a courtier told the king that the situation seemed favorable for them. The king agreed, mentioning the resistance, and was surprised that they were actually able to defeat the Demon King Menas. He considered it an unexpected stroke of luck, as he had initially only lent them a small sum, but had unexpectedly reaped such a large profit. His servant suggested seizing this opportunity to make the Noah Empire their own. The king smiled, saying that his courtier had read his mind. As the old saying goes, money is power. With money, they could hire soldiers. With soldiers, they could collect taxes. Then they would hire even more soldiers and gradually conquer other kingdoms. He asserted that indeed, money is power, because money can justify everything. With his current immense wealth, even the Noah Empire couldn't touch him. When they conquer Noah, the first thing to do is to drain him dry through taxes. Then it will be time to renovate the Snail Palace, making it more magnificent than ever before. His courtiers exclaimed, reminding him not to forget to give a little to the common people, otherwise they will revolt. But the king dismissed it as nonsense. If they blamed Noah's empire for their misery, they wouldn't dare voice any objection. Moreover, they lacked the strength or intelligence to resist him. His subordinate smiled, asking if he could imagine anyone hearing these words. The king laughed heartily, saying it was fortunate no one was eavesdropping. Both men chuckled with amusement. At that moment, a burst of laughter rang out, startling both of them. They spun around startled and asked who had made that sound. Menas stood there and slowly spoke, saying that robbing innocent people just to fill one's own pockets might be forgivable, but blaming everything on Noah's empire was unforgivable. The king glared and asked who he was. Menas calmly replied he was none other than the phantom thief Nemesis. Both of them repeated the name in astonishment. The king's courtiers wondered about its meaning, then asked if he could really fly. The king asked what he ultimately wanted. Menas chuckled, replying that a thief has only one goal, to steal treasure. If he hadn't misheard, there was a treasure trove of gold hidden somewhere within this palace. The king and his courtiers recoiled in shock, their hearts filled with unease. Menas secretly suspected that the Snail King of Resnoa was secretly funding the resistance, playing the role of a wealthy benefactor, but in reality, he was just a greedy man who only cared about money. If he were merely a greedy opportunist, Menas probably wouldn't have bothered. But since he intended to put the Noah Empire in danger, that was a different matter. To provoke the Noah Empire is to provoke the Demon King Menas. And to ensure the king abandons his wicked ways, he will personally take every last penny from this palace. In other words, he will pay the price. At that moment, the king hastily rang the alarm bell, which surprised Menas somewhat. The king chuckled faintly, saying that the man might have startled him, but after all, he was just a petty thief. Unfortunately for him, the king had long prepared for this situation. To protect himself, he had hired the most elite warriors as his personal guards. Immediately, a group of soldiers appeared. They surrounded Menas on the king's orders. All the guards charged in, using their most powerful magic. But just as they were about to reach Menas, he immediately activated his level 8 dark magic skill, Nullification. This caused all the magic to disappear without a trace. The soldiers stared in horror, shouting that their magic had vanished. The king, stunned and unable to believe his eyes, yelled at Menas, asking how he had done it. Menas smirked, replying that it was a pity, but a master thief was immune to all kinds of magic. The king gritted his teeth, acknowledging it was a formidable skill, but ultimately it didn't matter. He gestured towards Menas with his chin, telling him to look around because no matter what, he couldn't possibly storm the entire palace alone. Menas merely smirked, calmly replying that he had never said he was alone. At that moment, the entire palace shook violently, causing panic among the king and his soldiers. From everywhere, countless slimes poured out, crawling up the walls and taking over every corner of the castle. The king asked what was happening to his palace. A soldier ran in, breathless, with terrible news. A mischievous maid was besieging the city gates. She had melted the walls and destroyed the entire treasure vault. The king screamed in panic, unable to believe what was happening. Just then, a massive explosion rang out, and Primo emerged from the dust and smoke, calmly declaring that she had destroyed the city gates, plundered their precious treasures, and now she had come to ruin their entire day. She introduced herself as the Master Thief Maid. The king muttered that these people were becoming increasingly bizarre. Primo turned to Menas, happily reporting that she had thoroughly emptied the entire treasure vault, ensuring everything was sparkling clean. However, some items were too large to carry, so she ate them instead. Menas simply laughed, praising her and making her even happier. The king was nearly driven mad when he realized the treasure had been completely plundered. He glared at the bag of gold in Primo's hand. He lunged forward to snatch it, shouting that she had to return the money to him. He yelled that all the other kingdoms were doing exactly the same thing, so if they wanted money, they should go rob somewhere else. He tried to justify his actions. He said that according to information he received from spies in the resistance organization, someone had broken into the Noah Empire's treasury and stolen all the gold and silver. They needed to understand that he wasn't the only one doing this. Many others were also squandering the Empire's money. In other words, they were all the same, so he wasn't at fault. Menas told the king to stop making a fool of himself and to stop using the Noah Empire as a scapegoat. But when the topic of gold came up, Menas suddenly realized something. When he first abdicated the throne, he took with him some leftover money from the palace to use for his journey to Kiai. But what was initially just loose change turned out to be a huge fortune. That meant he was the one squandering the Empire's money. Primo stared at him in astonishment, asking if that was true. Menas said he was only borrowing it temporarily and that he absolutely intended to return it. He swore he would. The king immediately interrupted, saying that it would be simple, just return the money. Primo told him to stop. Menas looked directly at the king, asking once more if he really wanted them to return the money. The king agreed, firmly asserting that it was his money and he had the right to take it back. Menas said, "Okay, they'll pay it back." The king was dumbfounded, but before he could even rejoice, Menas continued. "But that's for the rightful owners of this money." The king was utterly astonished when Primo lifted the bag of gold and tossed it straight up into the air, sending the gold coins flying and falling all over the town. Gold filled the sky. It felt like a dazzling shower of light. Everyone looked up in astonishment, then quickly became joyful. They hurriedly picked up and gathered the coins that had fallen from above. Menas observed the scene, thinking to himself that money truly is power, just as the king had said. Without money, you can't hire soldiers. Without soldiers, you can't collect taxes or wage war. And a king without power has nothing left for others to fear. The king knelt on the ground, stunned as he watched his fortune being distributed. He wept bitterly about the money he had lost. The entire castle shook when Menas asserted that, "Tonight the balance of power in this kingdom has been completely overturned. The era of the greedy snail kingdom has ended, or rather their game has come to an end." After saying that, he left. Primo happily said that playing the legendary thieves was really fun. Menas agreed because as a phantom thief, of course she had fun. She smiled brightly and said that they definitely had to do it again someday. But then, she suddenly remembered something and asked Menas what exactly a phantom thief was. Menas laughed, then realized he wasn't so sure either. He'd only ever seen them in movies and his dreams. Yeah, but the important thing is they're incredibly cool, and that's enough. Anyway, he'd never be a bad guy, but being a little bad was perfectly fine. That was his principle. Hearing this, she asked again, "Really?" As long as he was happy, that was fine. But she had to admit that all of this made her feel a little nostalgic. Menas asked curiously what she was nostalgic about, and she reminded him if he remembered. When they were little, they had owners, Upir, Theo, and Ali-chan. They were always pretending to be heroes. Menas suddenly remembered. "Yes, I almost forgot. Before becoming emperor, he was only 9 years old." They often went out into the streets together, secretly helping people from the shadows. They did all sorts of silly things, like coming up with bizarre names for their secret missions. And they constantly proclaimed themselves heroes. Menas thought about that time. Yes, that was his childhood dream. But look how much he's changed now. As a child, he was immersed in noble ideals such as justice, kindness, and hope. He once wanted to become a kind person when he grew up, to become a benevolent emperor, and he truly believed he could do it. But now things have changed. At that moment, Primo rested his head on his lap and softly said that nothing had changed. Because he's still as kind as he used to be, Menas turned away, denying it. She playfully asked if he was blushing. He quickly denied it, saying that wasn't the case. But deep down, he thought that perhaps because they had known each other for so long, Primo always found a way to twist the meaning of his words. He quickly changed the subject, saying that anyway, they should go home, because tomorrow he would make her work hard, so she should be prepared. Primo happily agreed, saying she would do her best. Meanwhile, in the kingdom, cheers of joy echoed everywhere. Alex stood by the window, silently observing the people below. Just then, a man walked in and introduced himself as Prime Minister Guilford, saying he had an important report to deliver. She nodded, signaling him to continue. Guilford reported that, regarding the Slug Kingdom's sudden halt to its invasions, the information they had received appeared to be accurate. The Slug Kingdom had suffered a major blow from two mysterious individuals known as the Masked Super Thief and the Nemesis Super Thief. In addition, 2 sacks full of gold coins stolen from the royal treasury have been returned, and the one who returned them was none other than the Master Thief Nemesis. She whispered, "Perhaps there's still someone secretly watching over and protecting them." Guildford nodded, then continued reporting on the heroes' group. Alex guessed they still wanted to confront the 7 demon princes. When Guildford confirmed it, she already knew about it. The heroes were former members of the Resistance. Previously, she was so focused on expanding her forces that she embraced those who wielded swords without thinking. Now they are claiming all the credit for the coup and acting as they please, leaving her struggling to maintain national defense. And now this. She turned to Guilford, saying that now was not the time to pursue pointless matters. She asked him to relay that message to the heroes. Guildford confirmed the order, and then she asked if there was anything else. When he reported that he had finished, he bowed and prepared to leave. Alex was silent for a moment, then suddenly called him back. She hesitated for a moment before asking, what exactly was the true duty of a queen? Guildford looked at her for a moment, then asked if she wanted to hear it frankly. When Alex nodded, he replied that her task was to earn respect. She repeated those 2 words as if considering their meaning. Guilford continued, explaining that the ministers were responsible for politics, the generals for military affairs, but it was respect that maintained the unity of the governing system, keeping the empire on track. That was her task. Hearing this, Alex pondered for a moment, then asked if he was suggesting she rule through fear, like the demon Lord Menace had done. Guildford replied that it wasn't, but rather what he was referring to was quite different. Fear may bring respect, but the price is hatred and contempt. But if a queen wants to be respected and loved, she must lead her subjects, becoming a role model for them to follow. Alex was silent for a moment, then replied that she understood. Guildford noticed she seemed preoccupied and asked if anything was bothering her. She smiled gently, reassuring him she was fine, apologizing for keeping him there so long and allowing him to leave. Guildford nodded respectfully and departed the room. Left alone, Alex pondered what it meant to be a respected queen. She wasn't sure if she could truly achieve that. Alex had founded the Resistance based on pure ideals, but now, having actually become queen, she realizes at every step how naive she had been. This was not the scenario she had ever dreamed of. The newly formed Noah Empire quickly descended into chaos following the coup. Their magical defenses were neutralized, and she soon discovered they lacked the manpower and resources to resist external invasion. They also had no contingency plan. Those are just the threats coming from outside our borders. Inside, she was constantly the target of assassins. But every time danger was imminent, there was always someone who would come to her rescue. If that person hadn't foreseen all of this, not only would the Noah Empire have collapsed, she herself might not have existed either. The thought sent shivers down her spine. She knew she had to become a queen worthy of respect, but every day a new person wanted to kill her. She didn't know who she could trust. Even those who place their hopes in her today may one day take up arms and overthrow her. Fear clung to her, refusing to let go. Lately, she couldn't help but wonder, perhaps Demon Lord Menace is the true ruler this country needs, along with his tyrannical regime. Menace once held the empire and surrounding kingdoms with an iron fist. But now, Alex began to think that perhaps he was just doing what was necessary to protect the empire. He had never known fear. Now that she's trying to step into his place, she realizes that the throne is truly cold and lonely. She recalled what Menace had said to her before. The man who saved her that day didn't understand what message he wanted to convey, because she wasn't a heroine in a fairy tale. Those words certainly weren't meant for her, but even so, they gave her courage. She wishes she could know, who is he? He reminded her of someone from her childhood, a memory so faded that she couldn't even remember the person's face. But whenever she cried, he was always there for her. He was strong and kind, her hero. She tried her best to be like him, but in the end, she was still just a coward as before. If he saw her now, he'd probably tell her she needed to be stronger. And then a thought flashed through her mind. Could the man that day have actually been him all along? She closed her eyes. She whispered to herself that she missed him. Elsewhere, Minas was fast asleep. Recalling the past, suddenly Primo's voice rang out, pull him back to reality. He opened his eyes when Primo called him, urging that it was morning, it was time to get up. Manus suddenly looked at Primo, a question flashing through his mind. Why was she here? Then he suddenly remembered. Yesterday he had brought Primo home with him. She jumped on him, urging him to wake up, reminding him that he had adventurous work to do. Otherwise, he would be late. He thought to himself, after clearing out the snail kingdom yesterday, they had taken a detour to Gopher to deliver the gold, so he wouldn't get home until midnight. He mumbled, asking for 5 more minutes. Primo immediately retorted that if that were the case, she would have no choice. She would have to use the disintegration ray. Minas instantly grabbed her face, telling her to stop the joke. Primo smiled, cheerfully greeting him good morning. He sighed, thinking that if he had delayed even a little longer, his 5 minutes might have become an eternity. Primo told him that breakfast was ready, so after getting dressed, he should come down to the dining room. He agreed, though he was still a little sleepy, but perhaps a cool breeze would help him wake up. Manus opened the window, took a deep breath, and exclaimed that it was a wonderful morning. The flowers Upir gave to his new home are thriving, and the monsters he keeps are happily running and jumping around. This was an unexplored area of the cannibalistic forest. His previous home was too close to town, so it was eventually discovered. This time, he had chosen a place no one dared venture. The town was quite far away, so he had to use Glacia Labolas to travel. But on the other hand, in this remote place, he no longer needed to hide his wings. He looked around, taking in the peace of his new home. He's sober now. It was time to go down to the dining room. He remembered that Primo had said he had prepared breakfast and thought he had no idea she knew how to cook. As I was walking down the corridor, Upir suddenly appeared. A brilliant, energetic light emanated from Upir. This caused Manas to cover his eyes with his hands. Upir cheerfully greeted him, identifying himself as a loyal servant, and even prepared a perfect, nutritious breakfast for him. Manus was puzzled, wondering why Upir was so enthusiastic. Then he suddenly remembered. Yes, Upir was the energetic type in the mornings. Upir absorbed energy from the sun, like other plants, and that was completely the opposite of a night owl like himself. Upir invited him to sit down. Manus agreed as Upir proudly showed off the breakfast he had prepared. He said he could enjoy it to his heart's content. Before Manus was a feast of fresh, homemade vegetables made entirely by the monster. Manus looked at the pile of vegetables in front of him and asked Upir if he thought he was a herbivore. Upir immediately denied it, asserting that of course not. Manus bluntly stated that he didn't really like vegetables. Upir immediately objected, saying that was unacceptable. Vegetables are the answer to every problem. An apple a day keeps the doctor away, and vegetables are not only good for your skin, but also help keep your mind sharp and your mood stable. They can heal countless ailments, boost your strength and vitality, and transform you into unstoppable beings. Vegetables are the essence of life. Manus said he couldn't keep up with Upir's arguments. Upir politely accepted the remark, then encouraged Manus to try a bite. Manus looked down at the plate, thinking that, although it didn't look appealing, at least the vegetables were still fresh. He told himself he might have judged too quickly. Maybe they tasted quite good. With that thought, he picked up his fork, speared a piece of vegetable, and put it in his mouth. Immediately he froze. A strange flavor spread throughout the mouth, a distinctive earthy, grassy aroma combined with an unmistakable, pungent, earthy scent. Upir eagerly asked him how it tasted. Manus grimaced, immediately spitting it out, saying it tasted exactly as he had imagined from the moment he saw it. Upir seemed disappointed, asking if the flavor was too bland, and if so, he could add some of his essence to make it more flavorful. Manus immediately refused, saying that would sound even worse. Just then, a beam of light flashed past them. Primo appeared, angrily saying that she couldn't believe Upir was trying to force his master to eat this. Couldn't she see he didn't like it? She coldly declared that Upir was unworthy of being his master's chef. Upir, enraged, asked how she dared say such a thing and demanded she stop pulling his hand away. Manus, witnessing this scene, felt a sense of relief. Primo turned to him, gently reassuring him not to worry as she had prepared a much better breakfast. Manus was surprised by Primo's confidence as she excitedly introduced the dish she had prepared. Before him was a giant drop of slime in its raw, completely handmade state. Primo happily offered him a taste, confidently claiming it was the freshest and tastiest slime he could find. Manus was astonished, wondering what he was looking at. But then he understood. He should have guessed it sooner. Since Primo was a slime, this could be considered a lavish feast for her. But the important question was, would he survive after eating this? Seeing Primo's eager, expectant gaze, Manus gritted his teeth, took a piece, and put it in his mouth. Immediately, a shock of taste overwhelmed him. Its texture was chewy yet strangely smooth. However, the taste was like a sharp, sour, and bitter sensation dancing on his tongue. Its smell was like water, like a river, but also somewhat like a swamp. All his senses were assaulted so intensely that he lost all awareness of what was happening. Primo excitedly asked Manus if he liked her cooking, confidently asserting that it was definitely tastier than Upir's breakfast. Hearing this, Upir immediately objected, scoffing that a simple slime couldn't possibly surpass his culinary skills. He insisted that his breakfast was more to his master's liking. Neither willing to back down, they immediately engaged in a heated argument. During their argument, Manus suddenly spoke up, coldly declaring that both of them were fired. Primo and Upir stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock, unable to believe what they had just heard. They protested vehemently, insisting that it was impossible. Immediately, both slumped to their knees in disappointment. Upir said dejectedly that if he couldn't even manage to provide for his master's nutrition, then what was the point of all this? Primo sighed, blaming himself for letting himself fall to the point of having to compete with Upir. Manus looked at them, not understanding why they were reacting so seriously. He thought for a moment and admitted that it was actually his fault. After all, he hadn't created 7 demon princes just to be chefs. But even so, they had truly tried their best, so he sincerely apologized. Manus told himself he should have made breakfast himself from the start. Both Primo and Upir were stunned by his words. Without hesitation, he snapped his fingers, thinking that if he couldn't cook himself, then it would be better to create someone who could do it for him. Immediately, he activated his Genesis ability and summoned Silky. A maid appears. Silky is a housekeeper goblin, a type of monster that considers the house it inhabits as its own. To blend in with the servants, they often volunteer to do housework. Therefore, no monster was more skilled at cleaning and cooking than Silky. Manus ordered Silky to prepare breakfast. She nodded in agreement and quickly left. Seeing the scene before her, Primo's eyes welled up with tears, expressing her resentment and feeling betrayed as she reproached Manus. She choked back tears, asking how he could do such a thing, considering she had always thought of herself as his only maid. She wondered if she was still good enough for him. Manus hastily reassured her, asserting that it wasn't true. In fact, he had never considered her a maid. To him, she was nothing more than a loving and caring lord of destruction. Primo was stunned by his answer, unable to believe what she had just heard. Manus looked at her in confusion, asking why she had worn the maid's outfit in the first place. Primo replied, bewildered, that she thought he might like it that way. Just then, Silky returned with a thoughtfully prepared breakfast. She gently placed the food on the table, while Manus breathed a sigh of relief, finally getting a proper breakfast. He sat down, picked up a fork, and cut off the first piece to taste. The moment the food touched his tongue, he was immediately astonished. The flavors are subtle yet perfectly blended, each bite offering a wonderful balance of egg and butter. Despite its simple appearance, the dish is prepared with exceptional skill. Moreover, each individual ingredient enhances the flavor of the others, creating the perfect breakfast. Savoring each bite, Manus nodded in satisfaction, then looked at Silky and declared she had passed the test. From now on, she would be responsible for preparing meals in the house. Primo and Upir's eyes widened in surprise at his decision. Silky glanced at the two of them. Then he gave a knowing smile. Seeing that, both of them immediately became angry while Silky giggled mischievously. Primo and Upir declared in unison that this wasn't over yet. Primo admitted that Silky's dish was indeed delicious, but she still couldn't believe she came in second. Upir immediately scoffed, telling her not to be foolish because if his dish came in second, Then hers was obviously last. Upir said he couldn't understand why Primo thought her terrible dish could be on par with his. Primo admitted that Menas had made it clear that he didn't like vegetables. Menas watched the two of them arguing and couldn't help but recall the past, but then just smiled and continued to enjoy his breakfast. Suddenly, Upir sensed something unusual. He immediately turned to Menas. He asked permission to leave immediately to proceed to the edge of the sacred forest. Menas frowned, asking what was happening. Upir replied seriously that there was an unusual phenomenon near the fairy kingdom. The entire forest was lamenting, and the snakes in the forest became agitated. This was certainly a bad omen. Menas listened thoughtfully, then asked again about the snakes. After a moment of thought, he concluded that it was most likely due to the Dragon King Nidhogg. Upir was surprised when Menas went on to explain that now that Nidhogg's seal was broken, he might have attacked the fairy kingdom and was plotting to destroy the world tree. Menas sighed dejectedly, guessing that Nidhogg was probably just seeking revenge against humanity, while simultaneously absorbing the world tree's power to become a god or something similar. A typical foolish plot, anyway. Upir praised Menas, commending him for quickly recognizing the cause of this anomaly and even understanding the details. Menas laughed, asking Upir if he really thought he'd come all the way here just for fun. Upir was stunned for a moment, then burst out laughing. Primo excitedly said that it turned out all of Menas's calculations had been pre-planned. He always acted with a clear purpose. Primo looked at Menas with admiration, saying that he was amazing because she thought he had come here just to lazily enjoy life. Menas thought to himself, actually he did intend to relax at first, but since he was in a good mood, he would let it slide. Upir continued, saying that if Nidhogg's goal was indeed to destroy the world tree, then the situation would become extremely critical. Menas nodded in agreement, saying that if they lost Yggdrasil, they would all die. At the heart of the fairy kingdom stands a magnificent ancient tree, the Tree of Life. When the world tree withers, the world will perish with it. This tree is not only the heart, but also the lungs of the world, with its root system penetrating deep into the earth like giant blood vessels. It produces magical energy, particles of magical energy that play a vital role in all life. Magical essence is the source of magic, the purest form of life. Every living thing in the world is formed from magical essence and uses it to sustain its existence. When they die, the magical essence escapes from their bodies and returns to the world tree. If this cycle is broken, the world will immediately become desolate and no one will be able to survive. Menas thought that was enough. If this were a game, the player would probably have skipped this dialogue long ago. He thought Nidhogg's attack on the Fairy Kingdom was essentially a late-game event in Rizoa, another consequence of the Demon King's death. However, he didn't think the situation would escalate immediately. Nevertheless, he called out loudly to Upir. He didn't want things to get out of control, so Upir had to keep a close eye on Nidhogg's every move for him. Upir agreed, assuring him that if anything happened, he would report it immediately. Then Upir left. Primo watched him go and sighed, lamenting that Upir was always coming and going. Menas just smiled, saying it was his job. Then he should also begin his workday. Primo asked if he needed her to prepare lunch for him, but he checked everything again and told her not to worry. He even brought a handkerchief. Primo chuckled, pointing out that his collar was askew and his hair was still disheveled. She adjusted it for him, then said with satisfaction that he looked much better. Menas confirmed this and told Primo that he was leaving. She agreed when he reminded her to take good care of his house. She smiled and told him to be careful on his way home. As he was about to leave, Primo called after him, wishing him a pleasant day at work. Menas turned to look at her. I saw her waving excitedly. He suddenly thought that, until now, he always leaves Primo home alone. Then he remembered that day, the day she was so happy to be with him. He chuckled and patted his head. Then he asked if she wanted to come along. Primo was extremely excited and agreed immediately. Then she ran to him. Menas reminded her once again that no one in this town could know their true identities, so she shouldn't fire her destructive beam indiscriminately. Primo agreed and excitedly looked around the town, marveling that all the people looked as small as ants. She exclaimed excitedly, "Is this where he works?" Menas reminded her to lower her voice because from now on this was also her workplace. Primo was so excited that she forgot about it. She immediately affirmed that she would do her best. Menas told her that the first thing they would do was register her as an adventurer. Primo agreed and then curiously asked what a real adventurer did. Menas replied that they gathered in groups around a campfire, but at that moment, he suddenly saw Miko talking to the receptionist. She looked sad when she asked if Maddie was going to work today. Anna replied that they hadn't seen him since he left for Fathomless Flats. She also mentioned that the Snail Kingdom seemed to have paused its attacks, so she wondered if something had happened. Miko sighed, lamenting that Maddie always appeared and disappeared without warning. He just did whatever he wanted without thinking about the people who might be worried about him. Manus heard the entire conversation, chuckled, and asked Miko if she had been worried about him. Immediately, Miko shrieked in embarrassment, her eyes wide with astonishment as she stared at him. Anna looked at Manus worriedly and asked if he was all right. He smiled and greeted them both, then turned to Miko, continuing to tease her about worrying about him. Miko immediately denied it, but Anna interrupted, saying that of course Miko was worried. She had been going to the Adventurers Guild every day to check on him, and even scoured the town looking for him. Menace, hearing this, looked at Miko with a wide grin and asked if that was true. Miko immediately defended herself, saying that if anything happened to her apprentice, her reputation would be affected, so she was only concerned about herself. Menace secretly thought she was a typical tsundere, then chuckled, praising her defense. Miko immediately became angry and asked if he was mocking her. Then, furious, she questioned him about where he had been and what he had been doing all this time. She raised her hand to hit him, but at that moment, Primo quickly stepped between them, raising his hand to stop her. Primo said sternly that Miko might be an acquaintance of the master, but if she intended to harm him, they would be in big trouble. The unexpected statement silenced everyone around them, who looked at them with curiosity. Miko unexpectedly grabbed Menace by the collar, raising her eyebrows and asking, "So, this is what you like?" She stared intently at Primo, then suspiciously asked Menace where he had kidnapped her from. Menace said that this was what she liked and that he could explain everything later. Miko frowned, trying to piece together the information. He had gone to Fathomless Flats to observe the enemy situation, but by the time he arrived, the battle was over. Since it was on the way, he decided to visit his relatives, and that relative was Primo, who liked to pretend to be his maid and now wanted to become an adventurer, so he took her along. She stared at him, wide-eyed, asking if this was a joke. Menace calmly replied that it was all true, word for word. Primo happily nodded in confirmation, saying that her master and she were definitely related. Miko still felt something was off, but at least it seemed Menace wasn't forcing Primo to do anything. Just then, Anna approached, handing Primo her adventurer's card and announcing that the procedure was complete. Primo would start at rank G, just like Menace. Hearing this, Primo excitedly exclaimed that she was now of the same rank as her master. Miko, curious, took Primo's card to examine it. When she looked at the personal information section, she raised her eyebrows in surprise at seeing Primo's occupation listed as maid. She wondered if being a maid was actually considered a profession within the Adventurers Guild. Anna suggested Primo change her occupation, but Primo said she had no other talents. Miko reminded Primo that a crucial part of being an adventurer is finding companions to form a group. Their profession often influences how others perceive and decide to cooperate with them, so if she remained a maid, she might have difficulty finding teammates. Miko genuinely thought Primo should change professions right now. However, Primo confidently replied that there was no need to worry because the owner had said everything would be fine, as Miko Ren would be teaming up with them. Miko turned to look at Menace, realizing he had planned this all along. She frowned and asked if he was hoping she would take on another disciple. Menace smiled in agreement, emphasizing that Miko was his most respected teacher. Miko was angry, but then could only sigh. Miko accepted the condition in exchange for Menace being promoted to rank E, so that Primo could officially become her disciple. Menace was surprised that things happened faster than he expected. Miko said that she would never have done this if he didn't know some secret of hers. Menace curiously asked what it was, to which Miko coldly replied that he knew her real name and true identity. Menace raised an eyebrow, asking if she was referring to her use of a pseudonym. When Miko told Menace not to shout, he realized that if he knew her secret, he could make her do anything he wanted. Miko immediately regretted her words. In the forest, Miko sternly reminded them both that this wasn't a game. They were on a mission to exterminate monsters. Even though the opponents were weak, they were still monsters, so they needed to stay strong. They both agreed, but Miko refused, insisting they call her Miko. Primo tried to compromise, asking if they could call her Miko-chan. Miko thought for a moment and said that at least it was better than Miko-rin. Primo curiously asked what her role was in this mission. Miko told her that, since it was her first time, it was best for her to fight but not overexert herself. She then inquired about Primo's offensive abilities. Primo replied that she was very good at cleaning. Miko said they couldn't defeat the monsters with her cleaning skills. Primo, surprised, asked if these monsters were immune to cleaning. Miko replied that this was true for most monsters. Meanwhile, Menace secretly thought that Primo's cleaning ability could actually take down most S-rank monsters in one blow. If Miko didn't realize this, then it was truly a gift from heaven. Menace suddenly realized something when they both looked up. Miko said that in that case, Primo would support them from the rear, while she and Menace would weaken the monster first. Suddenly, she was startled. Primo noticed someone fighting. Menace guessed it might be adventurers and asked if they should get out of the way. Miko shook her head, saying they couldn't abandon them. Then he quickly rushed forward, urging everyone to keep up. Deep within the forest, a group of adventurers are confronting a stone golem. A stone golem is a living clay doll whose entire body is made of stone. The golem attacked the group of people. A girl tried to raise her hand to block the blow, but at that moment, Miko appeared in front of her, shielding the girl from the attack. The three girls in the group exclaimed Miko's name in astonishment. Miko immediately used her skill. Level 2. Light Magic, Bright Wall. A series of walls of light appeared surrounding the golem. It immediately attacked the walls, but in that instant, Miko jumped up and appeared behind it. She immediately unleashed her skill. Level 1 Light Magic, Bright Bullet. The beam of light struck the golem. As the golem shattered into a pile of rubble, Miko turned to the three girls and asked them to hold out their hands so she could examine their wounds. Then she used her Level 1 Light Magic, Healing skill, to heal them. She smiled, saying that was fine, then asked if they were the three guide sisters. Miko praised them for trying to hold their own against an F-rank monster. The three girls were delighted to hear that. They felt acknowledged. Miko simply told them not to worry, reminding them to be careful on their way home. The three girls nodded in agreement and left. When Miko returned, she apologized to the group for keeping them waiting, then took the opportunity to explain that what she had just done was how to deal with monsters. She hoped they had learned something from the battle. Menace observed, thinking to himself that Miko was truly immersed in her role as a senior. At this point, Primo praised Miko, saying she had done very well, especially with a human. Miko paused, asking again with doubt. Primo happily replied that her master had said she was very strong and possessed an extremely impressive skill. Hearing this, Miko's face flushed. She was surprised to learn that Menace had spoken about her to Primo. However, she didn't deny it, admitting that she was indeed very strong. She suggested they should call her their ace or something similar. Primo added that his master had also said Miko was one of the three strongest people in the world. Miko was astonished to hear this and asked when the standards had been raised so high. Primo was excited, saying that now she wanted to see Miko fight even more. Menace agreed, secretly thinking that among all the characters they could recruit into their group in Resoa, Miko was one of the three great powers because she was truly very strong. No matter how you look at it, her clothing-changing skill is her greatest strength. With the right training and leveling up, Miko's magic could reach a level where even Primo would struggle to defeat her. Menace had seen this skill countless times in the game, but now he truly wanted to witness it in real life. Thinking this, Menace quietly retreated, secretly summoning a forest wolf using his Genesis skill. The forest wolf is a creature that lives in the forest. Its body is gradually overgrown by vegetation, making it a part of the forest. Menace then pointed towards the creature, telling Miko that a monster had appeared behind her. Miko jumped back in surprise, asking in astonishment when the monster had appeared. She stared at it, wondering why an E-rank monster was here. Menace said that she would probably need to use her special skill. Miko quickly cast a spell. She used Shining Bullet again, aiming at the monster, but nothing happened. She was stunned, unable to believe her magic had no effect. When Menace told Miko that she might have to use her special skills, she said there was no need to remind her twice. Looking around, she muttered in disbelief that her magic was so useless. Immediately afterward, Miko began chanting a spell, and her body glowed brightly. A blinding flash of light appeared, enveloping her. When the light faded, her outfit had completely changed. Everyone around her stared at her in silence without blinking. Miko stood tall and confident, declaring her arrival. But no one spoke up. Noticing the strange silence, she turned back, her eyes beginning to well up with tears. Then angrily demanded that Minas say something. Minas turned away and apologized to her. She frowned in confusion and asked why he was apologizing. In his mind, Menace wondered if this was Miko's magical girl mode. Theoretically, her skill description stated, transform into a magical girl within 3 minutes. In the game, this outfit looked perfectly normal, but he asked if she felt embarrassed wearing the outfit. Miko blushed and yelled, "What are you thinking?" Primo, even more excited, complimented Miko on how great she looked. Hearing this, Miko felt a little comforted and thanked her. But then Primo wondered why Miko had suddenly changed her outfit. Miko was confused, not knowing why this was happening, only knowing that her outfit automatically changed whenever she used a skill. She immediately pointed at the wolf, venting all her anger on it, declaring that it was all its fault and that it wouldn't get away with it. Manus instinctively apologized to the wolf, much to its surprise. Without hesitation, Miko activated her magic of dream skill, aiming directly at the wolf. Then she used her starlight cannon move. A massive beam of light erupted, engulfing the monster, and instantly blew it away to dust. Primo's eyes widened at the sight before him, exclaiming that for an ordinary human, this was truly an impressive performance. Manus explained that when Miko was in magical girl mode, all of her stats were at their maximum. Furthermore, this state allowed her to use attacks with monster execution effects, enabling her to easily defeat monsters. Hearing this, Primo confusedly repeated the phrase, "monster eggs cushion," mistaking it for a food item. Manus shook his head, saying that wasn't the case. He meant that Miko could inflict damage on monsters regardless of their buff or defense effects. In Risoa, the majority of their enemies are monsters. Therefore, Miko's monster execution skill is extremely useful in most battles. Furthermore, she also uses Light Lament, a special skill incredibly powerful against dark-type enemies. With her light-attributed abilities and extremely high resistance to darkness, she is perfectly designed to easily defeat monsters. Ironically, a magical girl of light like her has a complete opposite. Manus, a demon summoner. The two of them were truly opposite extremes. A combination so bad that in Risoa, players once called her the ultimate weapon against Manas, a boss fight gimmick that counters Manas, the perfect girl to face this demon king, and a host of similar nicknames. And indeed, they were right. Manus turned to ask Miko how much longer she intended to stay in that state, then teased her that she couldn't possibly be enjoying it. Hearing this, Miko blushed and quickly explained that she couldn't return to normal until the 3 minutes were over. She stood there fidgeting, clearly uncomfortable in her outfit, and mumbled, hoping no one else would see her like this. But at that very moment, the 3 girls who had been there suddenly appeared from behind the bushes, anxiously asking Miko if she was all right because they had heard a loud noise. The 3 girls stared at Miko. Then suddenly they were all stunned. Miko wondered why they were reacting so strangely, but before she could say anything more, all 3 quickly stopped her, stammering that it seemed they had interfered in something they shouldn't have. Then they quickly and quietly left, leaving Miko standing there bewildered. The moment they disappeared from sight, Miko unexpectedly transformed back into her original form. She sighed in disappointment, lamenting that she had tried so hard to maintain a cool image while in Outtown, but things had ended this way. Manus apologized to her, but Miko immediately told him to stop. She said she didn't need his pity, but even so, she felt like crying. Manus tried to comfort her, saying she could still chase after the other 3 girls and explain everything. Hearing this, Miko immediately refused, insisting that doing so would only make things worse. She just wished all of this would disappear. Suddenly, Menace and the whole group sensed something strange. He quickly pulled his cloak over Miko. She asked him what he was doing and demanded that he let her go. But Menace sternly told her to be quiet. The 3 girls who had been there earlier suddenly stood motionless in front of them. Menace said that it was the gaze of Medusa. Miko, startled, asked if they had been turned to stone, and if so, why. Menace glanced toward the nearby bushes, then coldly replied, "Probably because of that thing." Miko was terrified when the giant snake appeared right in front of them. She asked in a panic what it was. Menace calmly replied that it was a giant snake, a B-class monster with a petrification skill called Medusa's Gaze. Miko was astonished to hear this, wondering why a B-class monster would appear here. She emphasized that this forest wasn't even a demon-infested area, so this was completely illogical. Menace nodded, agreeing that something unusual was happening, and I remembered Upir's words that something was wrong. Suddenly, a whole group of other snakes emerged from the bushes, surrounding the entire group. Miko gasped, warning that they were surrounded. Primo spoke up, saying something was wrong, as the snakes looked very strange.